Secrecy, Next Generation, Academy of Ancients, Book 6. Written by Avery Cross. Narrated by Jack Ainsworth. Chapter 1. Nyala. Standing on the apartment's balcony in Silent Heights, I breathed in my coffee and admired the sunrise. Today was my last day of summer vacation. Tomorrow I'd be waking up back on campus. I was now a third-year student at Academy of Ancients, starting my first 2 years of grad school. I'd worked double time last semester to get back on track the best I could. It had been an interesting few months, that much was for sure. After Briar and Zach had taken off on their trip to see the world, she'd left me a note saying she was handing over her old apartment to me. She'd paid for 2 years' rent to get me through the rest of my time at Academy. Her note said it was a thank you for being there for her, through everything that went down with her and Xylon. A familiar sinking feeling hit my stomach merely thinking of that villain's name. Whenever the others asked how I was doing, I'd lie and say everything was fine. Of course I didn't have nightmares that left me shaking. I'd completely gotten over fighting off hordes of the undead and killing necromancers. I definitely wasn't too terrified to use my summoning again. I was handling myself just fine. I was the happy, always optimistic Nyala. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. It's going to be a good semester, I told myself sternly, ignoring the chiding voice inside my head. It's going to be great. You're a grad student. You're not going to let anything bring you down. Nothing. I gave a firm nod, willing myself to believe those words, because it wasn't only my worry over my summoning that kept me up these past few nights. No matter who I bumped into on campus, I was going to keep my head high and not let it get to me. I enjoyed the bright orange sunrise a moment longer, then stepped inside to prepare for the day. I had to pack up what I'd need on campus and head to Academy to settle into my quarters. They were the same ones I'd had with Briar before and last semester. Thankfully, Headmaster Hook had allowed me to keep it without assigning me a roommate. Being with someone new would be too weird. I'd rather enjoyed having my own space while I buried myself in my studies. Well, mostly. I did miss having Briar around to talk with and laugh about everything. Watching her randomly set people's feet on fire had always been a good time. And if she'd been here over the summer, I had no doubt she would have let me live vicariously through her while she got revenge on my ex, that cheating asshole. Then again, she probably would have tried to set more than just his feet on fire. He deserved it. Watching him dance around like a maniac would have also distracted me from my other issues. Happy thoughts, Nyala, I said to myself with a deep, calming breath that did nothing to soothe me. Just keep thinking happy thoughts. In the middle of folding clothes and putting them into my suitcase, my cell rang. I picked it up and answered the video call. What are you doing wasting your vacation time calling me? Briar's grinning face stared back at me. Her eyes were alight with delight. Behind her, Zach waved. He was smiling like a fool, his gaze filled with so much love for the woman in front of him. I couldn't be happier for them. I wanted to check in with you, Briar said. The semester starts tomorrow, yeah? It does, but I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be fine? I peered at the scenery behind her. Where are you guys now? Iceland. Can you believe it? Briar changed the video so it showed me the gorgeous landscape around them. It's amazing. We've been here for a few days now. I don't think I want to leave. The mist around the mountains was more than incredible. Damn, you're taking a lot of pictures, right? Too many, Zach replied with a laugh. Good thing it's digital, Briar added. Her face appeared on the screen again. Really, Nyala, how have your last few weeks been? I was going to answer until I spotted the worry in that smile of hers. The fire in her eyes also flared for a second, and I sighed. Why do you keep looking at me like that? I asked. She gave me an innocent look that was anything but. I'm not looking at you like anything. Can a friend just call to check up on her friend? Her best friend in the whole world? She was laying it on thick. Not when you're supposed to be on your honeymoon for another couple of months. I said through my laughter. Last I'd heard, they'd planned to be gone a year. That year was quickly coming to an end, but it seemed to have been good for them. Neither one appeared bogged down anymore by what they'd experienced and seen. They'd both almost died numerous times, and one of those times had been by Briar's own hand. She'd been willing to kill herself rather than hurt any of us. Hurt Zach? I never told her, but I still had nightmares of when Zach found her on the floor, of how she'd been dead for those few minutes. "Maybe I miss you," Briar said, pulling me away from taking a painful stroll down memory lane. Ensuring my voice sounded as cheerful as possible, I took a moment to respond. "I miss you too, but come on, why are you calling me?" She hung her head. "All right, I might have heard from some other people that you and Roger broke up. Since I'm not there to do the good friend thing of getting you a ton of ice cream and hearing you rant and rave about what an asshole he is, I'm doing what I can from here." I was about to ask who would have told her, then remembered the visitors I'd had a month back. Zach's brothers, Luke and Nick, had stopped over on their way to Academy. After the incident involving the Necromancers and Xylon, I'd become friends with all of Zach's brothers. Adam was still at the Talon's HQ, but Luke and Nick had been helping get the campus up and running again. Hunter and Trisha were going to be stationed there this fall with them. There was still a lot of work to be done to ensure the place wasn't merely rebuilt, but that it would be safe from any future attacks by an army of the undead or necromancers. From what they told me, they were also going to use that time to remind not only the students and faculty there, but everyone else associated with Academy, that there would be no more plots to kidnap students happening under their watch. Clearing out the tombs of any other potentially dangerous undead had also been underway. Knowing how many dead bodies were laid to rest beneath the grounds was still terribly creepy. Knowing none of those would be brought back to life to terrorize us all would be nice. Back in July, the night Zach's brothers had come over, I'd been trying to pretend that everything was fine dealing with Roger. There'd been no point in lying to Luke and Nick. They'd seen through my fake smile in less than a minute. They'd also ended up bringing me several tubs of chocolate ice cream and had hung out with me the whole night, playing video games and listening to me bitch about Roger. "They weren't supposed to tell you," I told Briar, "and I'm good. I'm over it. It's no big deal." "Uh-huh. Then why does happy Nyala look like she's sucking on a lemon?" I stuck my tongue out at her, and she laughed. "Maybe I'm not looking forward to the semester." "Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is," Briar replied sarcastically. "It doesn't have anything to do with Roger turning out to be a piece of shit." The anger I thought I'd let go of over what Roger had done came roaring back, and I let out a stream of very vivid curses. Briar's worried frown was accompanied by Zach's. "Nyala, you're allowed to be pissed," she told me. "Seriously? If I were there, I'd set him on fire for you."
"I'd hang him upside down,"
Zach chimed in.
"Let all the blood rush to his head. That could be fun to watch."
"Oh, you're right. Then we'd set his feet on fire," Briar added.
"And trap him in a cage. I'd pay to watch that."
"You two are insane," I said, but managed to laugh. "As funny as that would be, it's okay. I'm glad I found out when I did. It's better than letting this go on and finding out after I'd invested so much time and fallen in love with him or something, right?" I was damn grateful I hadn't thrown myself wholeheartedly into the relationship. There'd been a reason I'd held back. I thought it was because of all the drama with Briar and the Masters and, hell, everything else. Maybe it had been my instincts trying to tell me that Roger wasn't the nice guy I'd believed. Back at the beginning of July, I'd headed to Academy to surprise Roger. He'd been staying on campus for the summer while he focused on a research paper for his studies. He'd said he was working with several other students researching the same topic and was spending a lot of time with them. That day, I tracked him down in the library and immediately wished I hadn't. Roger's research partner, Kaylee, had seen me first and shrieked, trying to cover herself. Roger had stared at me for a solid 3 seconds before he'd reacted, chasing after me while he'd struggled to get his pants back up. I'd raced up the stairs ahead of him, shouting at him the whole way, not caring who heard. I hadn't talked to the asshole since. He'd called me a few times. He'd even had the nerve to knock on my door. I wasn't sure what he thought he had to say to me. I wasn't about to listen to a damn word that came out of his mouth. The same night I'd realized how close Roger was to his so-called research partner, Luke and Nick had shown up. He'd probably been sleeping with her all summer. I'd been furious. Nick and Luke had offered to mess with him, but I turned them down. I told myself I was over it, and I was. I should have been. But now and then, the image of Roger with Kaylee seeped into my dreams. I supposed seeing them going at it like rabbits was better than the other nightmares I'd been having.
Nyala,
Zach said. I blinked, turning back to my phone.
you have a scary look on your face,
He said.
one I've only seen on Briar. Are you sure you're okay?
I'm perfect, I lied, putting a smile on my face. The semester is starting and I'm gonna be busy, so yeah, I'm awesome. You two get back to your trip and stop worrying about me. I'll see you when you get home. I waved and disconnected the video before either of them could argue with me. I was gonna be okay. Roger was not gonna ruin my first semester as a grad student. I had more significant issues to face this semester. Somehow in the spring, I'd managed to make it through without using my summoning. I'd had no practical classes, something I'd done on purpose. That was coming to an end. Now, though, I had to pick them back up if I was to have a hope of graduating. Somehow I'd have to use my power again. Too bad I hadn't seen any hint of my water summoning since after that final fight against Cylon. You'll just have to make it work. It's been a few more months. You're safe. Everyone is safe. No crazy psychopath will erupt from the ground simply because you use your summoning. I stared at my shaky hands, cursed enough that Briar would be proud of me, and returned to what I was doing. Once packed, I placed everything by the door and contacted the academy for a car to pick me up. While I waited, I received a text from my mum. She and Dad were vacationing on the West Coast for a while, enjoying their retirement. Right after I'd graduated, I'd spent time with them. They'd almost lost their minds once they realized everything I'd gone through since arriving at academy. I'd lied to them for months, but it had been better than having them freak out and try to drag me home. There'd been some crying and even more yelling. It had taken a lot for them to let me go when I was ready to return to Silent Heights. They'd made me promise to text every other day and call once a week. It was a bit overkill, but I didn't blame them. I texted Mom that I was all set to get back to campus and that they should stop worrying about me so much. I'd heard from my older brother Neil a lot too. He was a professor at another academy in the Northwest. He'd even offered to come by and stay with me for a bit this summer. I hadn't taken him up on the offer because Roger had been coming over a lot. Now I wished I'd had him visit. Maybe I would over winter break. My family had heard about my breakup, which made them worry all the more. A car horn beeped outside a while later, and I took my luggage out the door, locked the apartment up behind me, and made ready for a fresh start. Home sweet home, I said, pushing open the door to my quarters at Academy. Being here alone was stranger than I'd expected it to be. It had been the same for the semester in the spring, too. I'd hoped the second go-around would be better, but it was too quiet. At any second, I kept waiting to see Briar coming charging out of her room, Zach right behind her, while they argued about whatever antics she was up to this time. I took my time unpacking, humming while I did so, and reminding myself why this semester was the start of something great. Grad school meant more challenging classes, extensive research projects focused on my chosen field, and advancing my summoning skills. I wasn't going to have the time to think about Roger or how much I missed Briar. But that also meant no more hiding from what my biggest challenge was currently. Unpacking took me less than an hour, and after doing 2 laps around the space, I finally told myself to get a grip and venture out the door. I waved to the students I knew well, but never really considered friends. Once out of the dorms and on the grounds, I observed the new construction. They'd done enough for the spring semester to go on, but had mentioned plans for doing more before students returned this fall. The main building had gotten a major facelift and had a more modern feel to the stonework this time round. It also had gained 2 stories and stretched further back toward the cave wall than before. The grounds had been redone as well. The training areas, once designed for each of the 5 elements, had been completely revamped. There was new equipment set up, and where there'd only been 2 ponds for water summoners to use, we now had a small lake, complete with an entire obstacle course set up on it. It hovered over the surface of the water, suspended by powerful magic.
You should go test it out,
a familiar male voice said behind me. I spun around. Yeah, I'm sure I'll get to it eventually. I covered my arms, eyeing the course and worrying at my bottom lip. Or never. Never would be best. Hunter and Trisha stood beside me, dressed in their Talon uniforms. Hunter's hair was a mess, as always, and he had a light in his eyes that was never absent when he was with Trisha. Her hair was pulled back in a thick braid, and she too had a glow about her. A ring glinted on her left hand. My happiness warred with irritation at the sight of it. Not that I wasn't thrilled for them. I was, but it was just another reminder of how I was single again. Trisha reached out and squeezed my hand.
You know, the offer still stands.
What offer? I asked.
To mess with a certain asshole on campus,
Hunter said. You guys have to stop tempting me, I murmured. I might end up saying yes.
I don't see a problem with that. If Hunter cheated on me, you can bet he'd be wishing he'd never met me.
I had no doubts about that whatsoever. While they bantered about what Trisha would do to him, I glanced around. The campus had become busier since I'd arrived this morning. Students and professors wandered the grounds, taking in the new training areas and the gardens. There were 2 new walking trails, too. Though there wasn't a path leading to the waterfall, I found the entrance to it easily enough. Briar and Zach's place. I wondered if Hook should put up a sign outside of it, warning other students to stay out. Once those 2 were back with us, they'd probably always be there. I turned the other way, noting several new buildings and a gorgeous glass greenhouse. While my eyes danced over the newly planted gardens, a set of bright green eyes caught my attention. I stilled. I thought maybe he was staring at someone else, but realized, with heat flooding my face, he was looking right at me. My pulse shot up, and the strangest sense of familiarity hit me right in the sternum. He stood less than 10 yards away, and appeared to be about my age, maybe a few years older. His face was framed by short chestnut-colored hair. A few thick locks had fallen over his forehead. He brushed at them, then shoved his hands casually in the pockets of his brown leather jacket. He gave me a little nod that set my heart fluttering, then strolled away. Nyala? I jumped at the sight of Hunter and Trish studying me. What? Trisha glanced over my shoulder and grinned.
Nothing. Come on, Hunter.
We have a massive list of shit to get done today. What are you guys doing? I asked, still distracted by that guy I'd seen. Who was he?
We're down in the crypts,
Hunter said with a shudder.
I hate that damn place. We've been moving bodies and checking for any sources of magic for a week now.
He's a little scared of the dark, Trisha teased. Hunter rolled his eyes.
You would be too if ghouls almost ate you.
Don't worry, I'll protect you. Hunter beamed down at her, then kissed her. They walked away, hand in hand, and I was left to wander the gardens alone. I wasn't sure why, but I kept looking for the guy with green eyes. I'd had the strangest urge to walk right up to him, too. It was odd. Distracted by musings about the mysterious guy, I walked right into someone. Oh, sorry, I said, then froze at seeing who stood before me. Roger. And standing to his right, her arm wrapped tightly around his waist, was Kaylee. The sight of her there holding him, like she owned him, cut right through me. I told myself I could handle seeing them around campus, but all I wanted to do was freeze them in place and leave them there. They were damn lucky my summoning wasn't working.
Nyala,
Roger replied, his lips lifting in a poor attempt at a friendly smile.
You're here.
Did you expect me not to be? I asked.
It wasn't as if you talked to me this past month.
I pointedly looked at Kaylee, then back to him. I have nothing more to say to you. I saw everything I needed to see after you had your research partner laid out on a table. Hey! Kaylee snapped. Channeling Briar, I glared, and Kaylee's mouth clamped shut. Huh, It looked like I was perfecting my friend's pissed off look. You know he'll probably cheat on you too, I told her.
Why would he?
She said, tightening her hold on his arm.
It's not like I'm broken on the inside and wake up having nightmares and can't use my magic.
My hand tingled with the urge to smack her, but everything she blurted was true. I shifted my glare from her to Roger. He had the decency to look pale and look like he regretted spilling my secrets to his new girlfriend. Kaylee started to speak again, but Roger asked her to give us a minute. She pouted, but kissed him far more thoroughly than was necessary and walked off. If you had a problem with me, all you had to do was say so, I snapped. Not go blabbing it all to the girl you cheated on me with.
Is this gonna be a problem?
Roger asked, as if I hadn't said anything. A problem for who? Me? What kind of person do you think I am?
I didn't think you'd push on with grad school. Can you even use your summoning anymore?
That is none of your business. Not anymore.
Apparently it never was. You could have talked to me about shit, you know, and you never did. I'm the one that tried in this relationship.
So you decided cheating on me was the best way to handle the situation? You could have been a supportive boyfriend instead of getting annoyed that I was, how did she put it? Broken. He crossed his arms, staring at the ground between us. A few pieces clicked into place at the disgruntled look on his face. Wow! So that's how it was then. You went and cheated on me because you felt, what, neglected?
All I wanted was a girlfriend who cared about me.
I did care about you.
You did a piss-poor job of showing it,
he muttered. I took a half step back at the harshness of those words. His glare softened.
Look, I wanted to talk to you, okay? I tried, and you ignored me.
You cheated on me, I said with a laugh. What did you expect me to do? Hear you out and take you back? I don't even know why you're talking to me now.
I don't want you to spend the whole semester pining over me and disrupting my life.
Who says I'm not over you already? I asked, doing my best to sound nonchalant. He glanced around as if to make sure Kaylee was still gone.
Because I'm the only guy you ever dated in all your time here.
And here I believed he wasn't an egotistical guy.
Just don't let your depression over us let you do something stupid,
Roger went on. I wasn't sure what even to say to that. Depressed? He thought I was depressed over us breaking up? Before I could come up with a decent comeback, a warm hand slipped into mine. I wasn't sure who it was, but that touch was solid and comforting and very, very warm.
Hey, babe,
a deep voice said a second before lips pressed to my cheek.
Sorry I'm late. Did you get settled all right without me?
The guy with the green eyes was grinning down at me, his hand still holding mine. He gave me a wink, and my pulse raised. A rush of heat shot down my spine, and some part of me I hadn't realized I even had came alive. I had no idea what he was doing or why he was bothering, and I didn't care. I leaned into his side, and he draped his arm around my shoulders. Roger's eyes narrowed. I said, "What were you saying about my not being over you?" Chapter 2. Jack.
I stepped out of the front doors of the main building and looked around. This was the 6th academy I'd been to in the last year and a half. They all had the same feel, the same students milling around, the professors, and the air heavy with summoning and magic. I didn't take time to admire what would be my new home for a while. I stopped caring about such details a long time ago. I'd transferred to the academy in the mountain not for the classes. I couldn't have cared less about those. There'd be no future for me if I couldn't find what I was looking for. Please be here, I whispered, looking around and wondering where I should start my search. With every day that passed, my time was running out. I had to find the dagger of vitality. The trail had gone cold at the other places I'd been, and at every dead end I thought that was it. I'd never find it, and my life was over. Then I'd get a call, and the search would start again. It was false hope. That's what the doubting voice in my head said. But false hope was better than giving up and rolling over. I was a Scot. Giving up wasn't in our blood. I'd barely taken 3 steps, and the ache in my chest started up. I did my best to smother the cough and not let it drive me to my knees. Once it passed, I took several deep breaths to steady myself and focused my feet to move. This damned curse was digging its claws in deeper. How much longer could I last? I needed that dagger, or I would fail at not only keeping my ass alive, but avenging my family. Or most of my family. A face similar to mine, but younger, appeared in my mind's eye. Mentally, I cursed him out, silently vowing once again to find him and make him pay for what he'd done to us. I couldn't leave this world without getting revenge. As casually as possible, I meandered the grounds, listening to various conversations and making notes of potential locations to check. There was a collection of artifacts here, used for studies by grad students. Others were simply tucked away for safekeeping. Or there was a chance a professor could simply have it in their possession. Then there were the famed crypts beneath the campus grounds. The only lead I had on the dagger was that its last known location was here, and that it had something to do with the Morris family. With any luck, I'd find it. If not, then my hope was to pick up another clue that would tell me where the hell it had gone. I was nearing a small lake, noting the obstacle course suspended over the water. That was when I heard her voice. It flowed around me in a comforting, musical way. The two people with her were talking about some guy named Roger. I half listened to their conversation, too distracted by the woman with that voice. My gaze landed on her, and I simply stared. Dark brown hair was draped over her shoulders and fluttered slightly with the breeze. Her forest green sweater was loose and hung off her right shoulder. She had on jeans tucked into knee-high brown boots. She smiled, and though it made my palms sweaty and had me swallowing a lump in my throat, it seemed sad. Then her eyes flicked to me as if drawn to me, and she stilled. Her lips parted slightly and her brow creased. Her two friends were still talking about that guy. When they mentioned something about him cheating on her, I knew then why she'd been sad. Why do you care? You're not here to make friends or to get attached to anyone. Find the dagger and leave. That's the plan. Stick to it. I told myself to simply turn and walk away, but I couldn't do that. I gave the woman a nod first and compelled myself to back off. Though I wandered more, I kept finding myself always within a few yards of her after she too had taken to walking the grounds. She didn't seem to notice me again, and I decided that was for the best. I intended to head in a different direction, yet my feet kept bringing me right back within a few yards of her. I'd planned to scope out the entire campus today and figure out where to start searching for the dagger tomorrow. Now, that plan no longer seemed viable. Casually, I shifted through the crowd of students, never letting my eyes leave that head of brunette hair for long. I lost her momentarily while a group of excited first-years rushed by, heading toward the lake. Then her voice reached my ears again, and I turned. She was staring down a guy with some chick latched to his side. The woman whose voice had drawn me in looked furious. Her shoulders were tensed. The guy in front of her, was he this Roger asshole? Whatever he was saying to her was only making the situation worse. "Leave it," I whispered, unable to turn away from the scene playing out. "Just walk away. She's not your problem. You have enough drama to deal with on your own. Walk away. Or you step in, play the nice guy, and see if she can't give you anything useful." I paused at the thought. It wasn't a bad idea. She didn't give me the impression she was a new student, which meant she could be helpful in my search for the dagger if it happened to be here. The faster I figured out whether it was here, the better. The woman with the guy I'd assumed was Roger had walked away. Slowly I approached, picking up on the conversation. The second I heard him talking about how upset the woman in the green sweater must be about their breakup, I reacted without thinking. I picked up the pace and slipped my hand into hers once I reached her. It didn't go unnoticed how natural this felt, or continued to feel while I held it, then twined our fingers together as if I'd done it 100 times. "Hey, babe," I said, and bent down to kiss her cheek warmly. "Sorry I'm late. Did you get settled all right without me?" She turned to look up at me, and I winked. She didn't shove me away or demand to know what I was doing. Instead, she leaned into my side as if this wasn't the first time we'd met. Something about how perfect she fit against my side and how calming her presence was had me nearly forgetting she'd been staring down her ex. Draping my arm over her shoulder, I pulled her closer. She smelled of cinnamon and pine, of a forest near a lake. She smelled of Yuletide. Flashes of memories chaotically darted around my head. Memories when my home had been filled with laughter and smiles around the winter holiday. How did this woman I'd never met before manage that? I breathed in deeply, confused by what was even happening to me right then. Why did it feel so relaxed to be beside her like this? Why did it feel as if I'd known her for years?
"What were you saying about me not being over you?"
she said, startling me out of my thoughts. The guy's face turned a dark shade of maroon. He glared at me, but wasn't as intimidating as he believed. I'd dealt with far worse jackasses than him. Rescuing ancient artifacts from cults and extremely powerful and dangerous summoners had given me years of knowing how to chase someone off with a look. I glared right back. He flinched, then stomped off, muttering under his breath.
"Thanks for that."
I glanced down at the woman currently pressed up against my side. I didn't want her to leave it. "Anytime. I'm Jack, by the way," I said, and reluctantly removed my arm from her shoulders.
"Nyala,"
she said, and held out her hand. I took it, her palm cool against mine. "You're a water summoner." Why did that sadness in her eyes deepen at the mention of her magic? Roughly, she cleared her throat.
"I am, and from those flames in your eyes, I'd say you're fire."
I blinked, wondering when those flames had appeared. "Yeah, that's right," I said lamely. I didn't want to, but I released her hand and rubbed the back of my neck.
"You didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you did. How did you know what we were even talking about? Is eavesdropping a hobby of yours?"
she said with a teasing grin. "I might have overheard a few things when I passed you earlier while you spoke with your friends. And you were looking ticked off just now. I put the pieces together of who that asshole had to be." She crossed her arms, looking down at her boots.
"He was being an asshole."
"I'm sorry, by the way," I said softly, "for what he did." Her cheeks reddened. Man, what I wouldn't give to see that blush on her cheeks for a very different reason. An image of leaning in and kissing her properly this time passed through my mind. Fire sparked at my fingertips, and I curled my hands, smothering them before they became full-fledged flames.
"Thanks. I really am over him, and no matter what he thinks, I'm not depressed about our not being together. I had some other... You know what? Never mind,"
she rambled.
"Just thank you."
I get it. I had someone do that to me in the past. It's not a nice feeling. The woman I thought about hadn't cheated on me. She'd done far worse. I'd met her during one of my trips. I'd been an idiot to believe it was a whirlwind romance. The second I'd left, she'd found someone else. I'd gone back to see her again, and there she'd been with another guy. She'd hardly remembered me. Worse, she'd confessed she'd used me to gain access to information about a new dig site that had turned up several valuable and rare magical tokens. I'd learned my lesson about betrayal the hard way, after I'd gone and stolen those tokens back from the corrupt piece of shit general she'd procured them for. No one deserved to be used and tossed aside. Then I saw my parents murdered before my eyes, and had this curse latch onto me. That moment of stupidity seemed so far away now, so pointless.
"No, it's really not,"
Nyala said, drawing me back to the present, though the depressing cloud of my past lingered like an annoying weight on my shoulders that pressed down harder every damn day. She chewed on her bottom lip, then glanced up at me.
"I don't recognize you. Are you new this year?"
I transferred. I'm a couple years behind everyone else. I'm starting grad school later than normal.
"Ah, so you're old then,"
she said with a wink. I grinned right along with her. If you want to call 25 old, sure.
"Did you take a few years off?"
Usually I would have brushed off the question, but I trusted her. I had no idea how or why, but I did. Telling her the whole truth would be stupid, but lying to Nyala felt wrong. So I opted for a half-truth. I wanted to travel for a little while, take a break from the academic life.
"Understandable. Sometimes I wish I'd done that, instead of simply trying to rush through. Maybe I wouldn't be in such a weird state.
Her eyes widened and she glanced away as if she'd said too much. I was going to ask her what she meant, but then she was smiling and spreading her arms wide.
Well, since it's your first day here and you saved me from dealing with my ex, how about I give you a tour of the place?
It looked like I wasn't the only one in Academy with some secrets. That would be great, if it's not too much trouble.
There's a lot to see since they've redone it all.
What happened here? I asked while we walked toward the main building. I heard some of it, but there was never a full story that came out. The incident with the cult of Necromancers had been happening while I'd been chasing down leads on the dagger. I'd picked up bits and pieces here and there. The notion that several masters had been so corrupt hadn't surprised me. Over the last few years, I'd seen enough unethical masters, generals, and government officials not to be shocked by much. When I looked back at Nyala, my stomach dropped. Her eyes had darkened, and she'd paled. Shit, I'm sorry. Were you here when it all happened?
I was, but I'm over it. I was hardly involved,
she said, but her tone had gone up an octave, and she wrung her hands a few times before shoving them in her butt pockets.
Necromancers were trying to resurrect their leader and whatnot. It was crazy and a mess. The fight pretty much destroyed this place and burned the grounds to cinders. The campus has come a long way since that day.
Her gaze took on a faraway stare. Before I could apologize again for bringing it up, she pointed out the various buildings around the main one. Then we were inside. She stuck true to her word and gave me a thorough tour of Academy. I noted several locations to investigate further on my own, places where the dagger might be kept. There were several different collections of items being held there. That was what Nyala mentioned. She'd explained that some had been gifted to the Academy, and others were private collections that moved from one academy to the other for students to study. I was going to ask where those were, but a melody of cellos sounded first.
Oh, sorry,
Nyala said, pulling her phone out of her pocket.
I should take this. It's my friend Briar, and if I don't answer, she'll keep calling.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the tour.
I'll see you at dinner later, yeah?
I returned her grin. Yeah, dinner. She waved, then stepped away and answered her phone. Briar. She said her friend's name was Briar. I wondered briefly if that was Briar Morris, as in General Derek Morris's daughter. His name was one of the few associated with the dagger and its last known location. There could be several Briars she was friends with, though. I tried not to get my hopes up that I'd gotten this lucky on my first day here. Maybe not such a coincidence after all, I whispered to the empty corridor, and my gut twisted in knots. Using Nyala for information was doing the same as that bitch had done to me. You've done it before, I reminded myself hotly. Suck it up and get the job done. Don't get too attached and it won't be the same as what was done to you. Simple. During my 1.5 years of searching for that damn dagger and turning up one dead end after another, I'd wondered if I'd ever find the thing. I'd done worse than befriending someone to try and get information. I'd run in bad circles before for the sake of protecting magic. But what I'd done these last 18 months? Who I'd become associated with? My parents were probably trying to find a way to smack me from beyond the grave. What choice did I have, though, but to cross that line? I was running out of options. The curse thrown at me was impossible to break by any other means. I knew because I'd tried. I'd found intel on the dagger after digging through every scrap of notes my parents had kept. That damn blade was my last chance. These last few weeks, while the sickness worsened and I found no new leads, I'd been ready to give up hope. Then one of my contacts, and another thief from the underground, Gregory, received word from one of his sources. The dagger's last known location was Academy of Ancients. He hadn't known why it'd be here, but it was a start. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets and glanced out the nearest window. Nyala had already made it back outside and was walking the grounds, her phone pressed to her ear. If she was friends with the late general's daughter, getting close to her couldn't be helped. I'd be friendly, nothing more. Once I had what I needed, I'd return to keeping my distance. No one else needed to get dragged into this mess with me. I'd find the dagger, lift the curse, then set out to finish what my brother started. A tickle started at the back of my throat. It quickly turned into a hacking fit that left me weakened and leaning against the wall for support. Blood spattered onto the palm I'd used to cover my mouth. I shoved my hand out of sight. And once the coughing fit passed, I made for my quarters. I'd spend the day making plans. Tomorrow, the real work would begin.
Chapter 3, Nyala. I entered the dining hall that first evening back at Academy and debated whom to sit with. Hunter and the other Talons were seated together and beckoned me over. I could have gone to join them and hung out. Halfway to reaching them, I noticed someone else sitting by himself at a corner table. He had a plate full of food in front of him, but it looked untouched. Jack. He was new here and wouldn't know anyone. And after I told Briar all about him, she'd asked me when I would talk to him again. There was no reason, she'd said, to hold myself back after what Roger had done. So I waved at Hunter, then turned and headed for Jack's table. Mind if I join you? Jack jerked upright, surprise on his face that gave way to a genuinely pleased smile.
Do I look that pathetic over here by myself?
I sat down in the chair next to him and shrugged. I wasn't sure if you were still placating my boyfriend. The second the words were out of my mouth, my face burned, and I fumbled for an apology. Not that I want you to be. I was, happy with how much it pissed off Roger, and I don't expect you to keep wanting to talk to me or anything. I can go somewhere else. Jack's hand landed on mine, stopping me.
We said we'd see each other at dinner, didn't we? I was honestly hoping I'd get to talk to you some more tonight.
Really? My heart pounded against my ribs, and frost spread from where our hands met, creating little swirling patterns on our skin. The light refracted off the minuscule particles of ice, and I fought against tears wanting to spill from my eyes. Why was it I hadn't been able to use my summoning for months? Then one day around this guy, and there it was, coming out of me as naturally as it ever had. Jack grinned at the sight, oblivious to the array of emotions swirling around inside me like a hurricane.
Yeah, really. It was nice talking to you today.
The frost spread further up both our arms. This certainly never happened when I was around Roger. Jack winked, and a ribbon of red fire slipped from his hand. It didn't melt the frost, but joined it, making it glow. The sight was breathtaking. You're not so bad, I murmured.
Thanks. You're not so bad yourself.
My eyes flicked up. He wasn't looking at what our summoning had done. He was looking at me. Too fast. You're moving too fast. The panic nagging voice inside my head stopped me from doing something I might regret later, like leaning in and kissing him. God, Jack did have very kissable-looking lips, though. No, what was I thinking? Gently, I pulled my hand away. Frost melted and burned up from his fire. I cleared my throat and dug into my food, asking him where he'd transferred from.
Washington. It's where my family's from, and after traveling, I figured I'd head back there. It was where I'd completed my first 2 years. For some reason, this time around, it wasn't a good fit. I've heard good things about this place, and figured I'd give it a go, he replied, his tone light and a smile still on his face. What about you? The last few years I've been here. I have a place in Silent Heights. That must be nice.
It's not so bad, I said. It used to be my friend's place, but she sort of got married at the end of last year and has been gallivanting around the world with her husband.
For the last year? He asked, his brow rising. That's some nice long honeymoon. I suppose they really wanted to get away from everyone, huh?
A familiar shiver of fear raced down my spine, and I clutched the fork in my hand, willing the deluge of memories to stay tucked away. They went through a lot, more than most people should have to.
You're talking about what happened here?
I nodded, unable to get words past the lump in my throat. The dread grew, and I started to shake. Then Jack was holding my hand, and a reassuring warmth spread through me. His kind gaze held sympathy and understanding, as if he, too, had been through a traumatic event in his life that had left him unstable. Yeah, I forced the words out. Briar and Zach, Briar's husband, took the brunt of it. They saved us all, and honestly, I was shocked they were going to come back here to teach instead of running as far away as they could. I was glad they were returning. I'd missed Briar, her bluntness, her laugh, and how she was always finding ways to get into trouble. And Zach, he was a great guy, and he'd become my friend too. What went down with Xylon and his cult of necromancers brought us closer together. But it also had left scars. Would I ever be able to use my magic as I once had? Would I ever not feel that fear creeping in? Nyala? I looked over at Jack. His worried frown made him even more attractive, especially with how his hair fell across his forehead. Sorry, I got a little lost in thought there.
I don't blame you. You went through a lot too, I'm sure.
Not as bad. As I said, I was hardly in the thick of it. I'm fine, perfectly fine. I went back to eating and asked him about his family and their thoughts of him moving all over the place. He let go of my hand and thankfully gave in to my changing of topics.
They like to travel, so it's not a big deal,
he said, but his tone sounded off. Flames flickered in his eyes, and I half expected his feet to catch fire, like Briar's did when she was upset. There were a couple of errant sparks around his fingertips, but they flickered out fast enough.
What about yours?
I told him about my parents and my older brother. We ended up discussing what we were both taking classes for, and I was delighted to find he was undergoing the same grad program I was. We shared the same interest in preserving our magical histories. There was a need for summoner archaeologists as much as there was for human ones. After Xylon and his cult, I figured there were more items like that damn book of his out there in the world too. Keeping those items preserved and protected was as important as tracking down dangerous criminals. Adam, Zach's oldest brother, had already approached me about working with the Talons to find such items. He wanted to put together a team in the future and offered me a position once I made it through grad school. I might not be a fighter, but I'd always been fascinated with history, particularly summoner history. Jack was too. His eyes lit up even more once we broached that topic. In the back of my mind, I made note to tell him about Adam's team and to see if he'd be interested in it too. Talking with Jack was as easy as it had been during our first encounter. That panicky voice spoke up a few times the longer we sat at the table. It reminded me how hard and fast I'd fallen for Roger. What I'd felt for him hadn't come close to what I was feeling for Jack already, and it left me nervous about trusting myself. I didn't get any bad vibes from Jack, but it was only one day of knowing him. You know, it's getting a little late, I said once the conversation came to a natural lull, and I've got a few things I need to unpack still. That was a lie, but it sounded like a good enough excuse. I wanted to stay and talk with Jack for the rest of the night, but I was second-guessing what was happening inside my head right then. And we were already some of the last people in the dining hall. I hadn't realized how late it was.
Do you mind if I walk you to your room?
He asked, standing up with me. I meant to say no, and that I was sure I'd see him tomorrow. I nodded instead, and we walked out of the dining hall together. Our hands brushed while we walked, and we exchanged a shy glance, then looked away at the same time. The silence between us wasn't weird, but relaxed, just like everything else was with him. I was in trouble. Big trouble. Outside my quarters, I thought of a reason to stay out here a few minutes longer. I suppose I'll see you around tomorrow. It's orientation week, so not much for us to do, but I'll be on the grounds for a bit if you're bored or anything. I puffed out my cheeks, noting I was rambling again. Jack shifted closer.
I'll find you.
Why did those 3 words make my pulse race? Warmth flooded me, and I returned his grin. Great, that's great. I'll see you tomorrow then. Not sure what made me do it, but I leaned in and kissed his cheek. He was so warm that I lingered, pulled in by the natural heat of his fire summoning. Oh, but it was so much more than that. Vaguely, I remembered how Briar had described her attraction to Zach. She'd said it was the strangest thing, satisfying and intense simultaneously. Like she'd known him forever, and no matter what she told herself, she knew he would be part of her life. I'd never had that with Roger, and had merely thought I'd experienced that pull differently than Briar had. Standing outside my door with Jack, I knew precisely what Briar had meant. It had been one day, and I felt like I'd been waiting for years for Jack to show up. I pulled back, elated and terrified by that thought. Jack's eyes shimmered with fire. His hand found mine, and gently he pressed my back to the door. His mouth hovered near mine, but he waited for me to make that final move. That panicky voice told me to wait, but my racing heart pushed me to close the distance. Jack's lips were as warm as his cheek, He took control of the kiss, cupping my cheek with his free hand while our bodies pressed together right there in the corridor. Frost covered my hands, and heat erupted against my palms. It wasn't burning, but it was certainly warm enough for me to know he'd pulled on his fire. I reached for the door, ready to take this inside for a while, but Jack slowed the kiss and raised his head.
He said and laughed. That was unexpected.
Good unexpected? Smiling, he brushed his lips over mine once more.
Definitely.
His brow furrowed, and he gently tucked my hair behind my ears and stepped back.
Night, Nyala.
Night. He shoved his hands in his pockets and headed down the hall to where it became a four-way intersection. I opened my door and was about to duck inside. Then I heard the coughing. I poked my head back out. Jack was leaning against the wall, bent over double. The fit sounded horrible. I started to move toward him, wanting to make sure he was all right, but he righted and darted around the corner. The coughing continued until he was too far away for me to hear. Curious and worried now that he was hiding something, I went inside my place and shut the door. Slowly I meandered around the living room and went to stand at the windows overlooking the grounds. As great as the evening had been, and that kiss, Jack had dodged several questions tonight, mostly involving his family. All he kept saying was that they traveled a lot, and he spoke to them when he could. I knew nothing about what they did for a living, or why they never stayed in one place. When I'd asked about siblings, he'd looked furious for a split second. Then he told me he was an only child. You have your secrets too, I told my reflection. I hadn't told him half of what I'd been involved with during the Xylon situation, nor had I said anything about how I hadn't seen my power manifest itself in months. Not until he waltzed into my life. That was beyond curious and strange, and had me tangled up inside. I sighed and headed to my room. This first week would be easy enough to get through. When my classes truly started, I knew I'd be in for a struggle. And with Jack thrown into the mix, instinct told me this was about to be a very interesting fall semester. The first week ended with demonstrations from the older students for the first years to watch. The day before, I'd been introduced to the new water summoner professor, Ula Keller. After the battle at Academy against Xylon and Hiskald, Professor Dre had decided it was time to move on. I'd been worried at first to start with someone new, but Ula was a fantastic witch. Her water summoning was like watching a piece of art come to life. I'd sensed the ferocity behind each of her powerful moves. After watching her summoning, she told me she'd been a Talon once upon a time. She asked me to show her what I could do and wanted to know if I'd be interested in showing off my skills. I'd fumbled my way through a reason why I couldn't and headed off before she'd questioned me too much. She was going to find out soon that I was, as Kaylee had so nicely put it, broken. While waiting for the demonstrations to begin, I'd wandered out to the grounds. I'd been standing near the lake for a while now, admiring the new obstacle course hanging over it.
Are you showing off for the first years today?
A brush of warmth touched my side, and a pair of lively green eyes shone down at me. My heart jumped as it did every time I saw Jack. At first, I thought I was the only one a nervous wreck about our abrupt, powerful connection that seemed to come out of nowhere. Then I'd catch him rubbing the back of his neck, or notice that his hands were a little on the shaky side, and understood this was new for him too, this crazy rush of emotions that shouldn't have made sense, but did. I missed you at breakfast this morning, I told Jack.
I overslept, he said with a chuckle. Getting settled into a new place took more out of me than I expected it to.
It happens to the best of us, though I wouldn't recommend you oversleeping next week.
I shall do my best. Feel free to come knock on my door and wake me up.
He leaned down and kissed my cheek. I leaned into his side, and his arm draped over my shoulders. Why was it so easy to be around him? Last night, I'd finally texted Briar about everything that had gone on with Jack since day one. She'd video called me immediately to check in and ask why I'd sounded like I was freaking out. How could I not be, had been my question. I'd spent every morning this week getting a cup of coffee with Jack and taking a long walk around campus. Then we'd grab lunch and somehow talk until dinner. I'd shown him the artifact collections Academy boasted, and had been thrilled to see how excited it made him. He'd asked where the rest of them were, and I'd pointed out the building where the ones for student study were housed. Those, however, required an escort and permission to see. I told him he'd get a chance to check those out sometime this semester. He was highly knowledgeable about what we'd been able to see, and a great storyteller. I'd been enthralled by the deep timbre of his voice more than once. He knew about every piece I pointed out to him. The wealth of information he had was staggering, especially the details of how particular pieces had been recovered from black market auctions or the hands of those seeking to use them for nefarious reasons. It had brought up a lot of questions, but I'd held back on asking them all. Briar had asked if I was worried about rebounding, or if Jack would turn out like Roger. I'd admitted to the first, but not the second. I had only just met Jack, it was true, but I believed him when he said he'd never hurt someone as Roger had hurt me. The rebounding, well, there had been some heated kisses thrown into our nightly talks in one of the many newly built lounges in the dormitory building. Did that count as rebounding when I wanted them to keep happening? When I wanted to keep hanging out with Jack? Clearing his throat and removing his arm from me, Jack turned to the side. He coughed, the act racking his body so hard I worried he would fall over. I held onto his arm, steadying him until the fit passed. It wasn't the first time I'd witnessed one. Jack, he coughed once more, then straightened.
Still getting over that damn cold.
I promise you I'm okay, he assured me.
You never said if you were demonstrating your water summoning today.
No, I mumbled. But we should find a good place to stand and watch. Taking his hand, I pulled him away from the edge of the lake to where the other students and professors had gathered to watch. I rested against his side, soaking in his warmth. Professor Ula stepped up to the water's edge. I waited for her to give a demonstration, then inwardly groaned while she introduced Roger. It figured it'd be him she chose to show off, as if his ego needed another boost.
Want to sneak away?
Jack whispered. No, I'll be fine. Maybe he'll mess up and embarrass himself.
I can make that happen,
Jack replied. Tempting. I don't want you getting into trouble this early on.
And what's life without a little trouble now and again?
A few years ago, I might have agreed with him, but I'd had my fair share of trouble. What I wanted was to enjoy a second quiet semester at Academy, and maybe find a way to use my summoning again. It had made an appearance 2 more times, but always around Jack, and always without my intending to pull on it. Any time I actually tried, I failed miserably. The crowd quieted down. Roger summoned water to his hands. At first he pulled it from the air, creating 2 thin streams that coated his hands and ended up to his shoulders. Confidently he moved through the steps, and I hated him all the more for how graceful he was. Water shot into the air like fireworks, became frozen masterpieces of frost and icicles, then melted and returned to his hands. The first years applauded and gasped in delight, while the rest of the gathered crowd nodded in approval. I noted the professors near Keller, including Headmaster Hook, looking as proud as ever. I wondered if he knew what kind of man Roger had turned out to be. Probably not, and as much as it would amuse me to watch Roger get lectured by Hook, I wasn't one to purposely stir up drama. Roger twirled his hands and continued the spectacle. There were more elated shouts and a few whistles. He pulled on water from the lake, pushing it up into a small tidal wave behind him. The water's roaring shot through me, taking my mind to a place it hadn't gone to in months. An explosion rocked the ground. Screams erupted around me, and I was thrown away from the horrible altar Xylon's cultists had erected. Bodies were everywhere, and there was blood. So much blood. The water crashed back to the lake, and I stumbled. Nyala? Jack's arm slipped around my waist. Are you okay? The crowd was cheering and hollering for a job well done. A tangled web of emotions stole the air from my lungs. I nodded, then said something about finding Jack later. I hurried away from the edge of the lake. I walked and walked, shaking out my hands to try and get a hold of the fear. It finally stilled near a line of trees that led to a small garden of hydrangeas and lilies.
Where's the fire?
I jumped with a yelp, then whirled around and shot Hunter a glare. Seriously? He held up his hands, a worried smile dancing over his face.
You look upset.
Nope, I'm great. Why wouldn't I be? I said, working to keep my tone light and happy.
Because you just had to watch your cheating ex demonstrate his water summoning?
He moved until he stood beside me.
Something I know you haven't been able to do in months.
I blinked, then forced a laugh. What are you talking about? Of course I have. He crossed his arms and his brow arched.
Say that to me with a straight face.
I matched him stance for stance and lifted my chin. I can summon water just fine.
Prove it.
I scoffed, not bothering to try because I knew it was a lie. My shoulders slumped, and I whispered, How did you even find out?
Luke and Nick. They were here in the spring. Briar asked them to keep an eye on you. She was worried about you after everything that went down.
Does she know? I asked in a panic.
No, and she won't, but no more pretending you're okay when you're not.
I'm fine, honest.
Then why can't you use your power?
He challenged gently.
Nyala, we all saw some shit. Undead, necromancers. I know you took lives the same as I did, the same as everyone else. You did what you had to do to survive. But that stays with you when you're a good person. You didn't ask to be a soldier. You never expected to be in that situation.
I shuffled on my feet and wrapped my arms around myself. How can I stand here and complain about nightmares and flashbacks when we saw firsthand what Briar and Zach underwent?
You know if they were here right now instead of me, they'd be scolding you for saying that.
He took hold of my shoulder.
You're allowed to not be over everything. No one's going to judge you for it.
What if I can never use my magic again? I blurted, out of the fear I'd had for so long now.
You will. Don't doubt yourself so much. It might take time, and you need to let yourself have that time and know it's okay. I'm here for you, as is everyone else. Don't forget that.
God, now you sound like me when I had to talk Briar down off a ledge.
Nyala.
All right, I said, giving in. Maybe it would be good to talk about it some more.
Anytime you want. Nick and Luke were going to over the summer, but you apparently had something else to deal with that night.
I knew those two had stopped by for more than a friendly visit. The appreciation I had for my family and friends shot up tenfold. I swiped at my eyes and told myself now wasn't the time to turn into a blubbering mess. So, how are wedding plans coming for you and Trisha? I asked. Hunter broke into a grin, even though the subtle flutter of wind around us said this conversation about my magic was only over for now.
Great so far. She's taken care of pretty much all the decisions. I just have to show up with my charming self.
That sounds easy enough for you, I teased.
I think I can manage.
He glanced back toward the lake.
You seem to have moved on from Roger.
My cheeks grew hot. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. So you haven't been spending all your free time with the new transfer. What's his name? Jack?
I glared at Hunter, then broke out in laughter at the wagging of his eyebrows. All right, yeah. I've been seeing him a lot. And it's been great. More than great. Have you ever thought... I cut myself off. Never mind, I'm gonna sound insane.
We're friends with Briar. No, you won't.
Did I dare ask him if he believed at love at first sight? No, I couldn't get myself to say the words aloud. Being around Jack was natural and fun, and I knew I was in trouble with how quickly I seemed to be getting attached to him. I was still torn between it being as simple as insanely great chemistry, or me clinging to anyone who wasn't Roger. What if I was only doing this to get back at the cheating bastard, and I didn't realize it? What if I was searching for someone to hold on to, so the darkness of my past and fears over my magic wouldn't drown me? I like him, I said slowly, measuring my words. I'm just not sure where I'm at with that.
I understand.
You do? Hunter beamed while he stared at the powder blue hydrangeas. I knew he was seeing something other than flowers.
The first time I met Trisha, the first time I spoke to her, I was done for. I knew right then she was it. I sounded crazy. Zach thought I was. But sometimes that's how it is. You find your person, and they crash into you, sweep you up, and never let you go.
Briar said the same in a way. Maybe not at first sight, but she said she just had a moment where she knew.
My advice, he said. It's a new year. There's no cult of necromancers rushing around trying to kill us all. Take advantage of the peace and let yourself live. Live and feel and love, if that's what it comes down to.
It's too soon for that, isn't it? I argued.
When you know, you know.
He lifted me up in one of his famous bear hugs and spun me around until I was cackling. Then he set me back on my feet, gave me one last squeeze, and said he'd see me around. I remained in the garden for a while, running through every moment I'd spent with Jack in the past week. But as warm and fuzzy as those thoughts made me, they were overshadowed by flashes of darker moments, filled with blood and terror. Could I let myself be with someone else when I knew how much of a mess I was? Could I drag him straight into that chaos, knowing it might not end well? Chapter 4. Jack.
Classes started, and with them came the same dull routine as with the other academies I'd attended. The only bright side to my days was seeing Nyala. After the first week, I told myself I was getting in too deep, too fast, and should cut ties. Then came the argument with myself over why I was getting close to her, that it had nothing to do with what she made me feel. That, however, was a massive lie. I woke up in the morning looking forward to seeing her over a cup of coffee, and how we'd always end up finding each other around dinner time again, no matter how different our class schedules were. I tried to tell myself it was desperation, why I was clinging to her so hard. Desperation to feel something other than hatred and fear that I would fail to save myself and avenge my family. Friday morning, when I headed down to snag something to eat before continuing my search of the buildings, I tried to convince myself to find a reason, any reason, to slow things down with Nyala or break it off entirely. By the time I'd reached the hall and snagged a coffee and a muffin, I'd steeled my nerves, ready to do what was necessary. It didn't matter if Nyala was a link to the Morris family. She was a good person. I would not send her down a path that would put her in danger. I'd faced worse situations than the difficult conversation I was about to lie my way through. I could handle whatever she threw at me, no matter how harsh it might be. I scanned the hall, searching for a familiar head of brunette hair. Then I spotted her. My heart sank, and worry overrode everything I'd rehearsed in my head to say. "Hey," I said softly once I was at Nyala's side, and she jumped, nearly knocking the coffee out of my hands.
"Crap, sorry,"
she mumbled, and shoved her hands through her hair, which was messier than usual.
"I'm not exactly awake yet, I don't think."
I sat down beside her and slid her my coffee after I noticed she had nothing in front of her. She was pale and had her sleeves tucked around her hands like she was trying to burrow into her pink hoodie. "You don't look so good. Rough night?" I asked.
"I just didn't sleep is all."
I nodded to the coffee. She tried to push it back to me, but I didn't let her. "Did you eat anything yet this morning?"
"I wasn't sure I could stomach it,"
she whispered, then blanched. She fumbled for the mug and sipped the warm brew, clearly trying to hide her face from me. Every morning, she was always smiling and remarkably cheery for so early. I'd been more than happy to listen to her talk about anything and everything that came to mind. She had a way about her that sucked me in. To see her in such distress tugged at my heart. Something had happened. This was almost how she'd looked after watching Roger show off his water summoning. Almost. This morning was far worse. The way her eyes darted around the hall and the slight tremor in her hands while she picked up the mug and tried to take another sip were all signs I'd seen before. Not on her, but me, after that horrific night when I'd lost my parents. "Nightmare?" I asked, and Nyala's eyes widened.
"Something like that."
During our 2 weeks together, she hadn't spoken a single word about what she'd endured regarding the Xylon incident, as everyone here referred to it. Most of what I'd picked up only dealt with the final showdown that occurred on campus grounds. With Nyala, I sensed there was far more to the story than everyone else knew. I hadn't asked her about it, figuring she'd tell me if and when she wanted. But if she was having nightmares that left her this unsettled, she hadn't talked about it to anyone. "Do you want to talk about it?" She set the coffee down and pushed it aside.
I never do.
She ran her hands down her face, then abruptly stood up.
I'll see you later, okay?
She squeezed my hand. The smile she gave me didn't reach her eyes. Then she was rushing out of the hall. I finished off the coffee, contemplating how I might help Nyala. Why are you even trying? This can't be anything beyond you getting information. Besides, do you really think you're the best person to help her through nightmares and flashbacks? Grudgingly, I left the hall, tossing my uneaten muffin in the bin on the way out. Today was a free day for me, and I intended to spend it meandering around campus and searching for potential locations for the dagger. I'd requested to see the artifacts housed in one of the separate buildings, but had been denied. According to the letter that had been left on my door, the classes I was taking didn't require seeing such items. I'd have to wait until next semester. If they weren't going to give me a guided tour of that building, I'd have to find another way in. Breaking into that building wouldn't be simple, and I wanted to check the other more accessible locations first. That was what I should have been doing. Instead, I ended up on the grounds following one of the trails that led through the forest inside the mountain. "What are you doing, man?" I muttered to myself, angrily swatting a low-hanging branch out of my way. "It doesn't matter what you feel anyway. It's not possible to be this close this fast. You swore off whirlwind romances, remember?" The second the words left my mouth, I knew that wasn't what this was with Nyala and me. From the second I locked eyes with her, something inside me started to burn far more potent than any fire I'd summoned. I wasn't one to believe in fairy tales, not after all the evil I'd faced these past few years. For these last 2 weeks, though, that's what this had felt like. That I was living in some insane world where one look was all it took to lose my heart. The walking trail ended up near the training grounds, and I stopped, staying in the shade of the towering maple trees. Near the lake, Nyala stood apart from the other water summoners. They were probably first years. In all the time I'd been around her, I'd only seen her magic manifest in a handful of moments. Each time those breathtaking patterns of frost appeared on her skin and mine, the strangest look of shock and frustration would appear in her eyes. Now I waited for a chance to see her use the full extent of her abilities. She went through the motions, but no water appeared in her hands, and none came to her from the lake. Professor Keller joined her. From how Nyala's shoulders slumped, Keller was trying to talk her through whatever was wrong, but wasn't getting very far. Nyala lifted her head, and I spotted the wetness dotting her cheeks before she wiped it away. My chest clenched, and I nearly rushed out there. To do what? You're turning into a sappy idiot. You can't afford to lose focus. Not now. I turned on my heel and set off down the trail, heading away from Nyala. A tickle started in my throat. The ache in my chest from seeing Nyala so upset became a stabbing pain. The coughing fit doubled me over, and I stepped off the path to lean against a tree. An icy touch slithered down my spine. The forest spun around me. I dug my fingers into the bark. The coughing ended, but the pain lingered. Bastard, I spat furiously. I'll pay you back in kind for this. I swear I will. Ensuring there was no blood dotting my lips, I straightened, returned to the trail, and resigned myself to spending the day hunting for the dagger. My search turned up nothing. Evening rolled in and I hung around the corridor outside the dining hall, waiting for Nyala. She never showed, and I exited the main building, wondering where she was. I was going to head to the dormitories and see if she'd turned in early. A single figure standing at the edge of the lake pulled my attention. Nyala. She stood alone, her hands at her sides. Slowly I made my way across the lawns, not wanting to startle her. When I was a few yards away, she raised her hands toward the lake. The surface rippled. A few solitary drops rose to her fingertips, but that was it. Her arm trembled, and she sputtered under her breath. The trembling worsened. Then it was her whole body quaking. A harsh gasp of air followed, and she clapped her hands to her temples. She staggered and hit the ground on her knees. I was running before I'd even thought to move. I sank to my knees beside her and reached for her arms. She jumped and whipped around to look at me. Our eyes met. Then she fell against my chest. I bundled her up in my arms, hugging her. "Hey, it's okay," I murmured, Whatever it is, it'll be okay.
No, it won't,
She rasped, shaking her head.
I can't make it work. I can't do anything. How am I supposed to be a water summoner when I can't even use my magic, huh? Tell me that.
I tried to think of something to say, but she started rambling, and it was all I could do to keep up with the words flowing like a river out of her mouth. There was something in there about undead and Briar's dad and the masters. There was more about two men named Theon and Mark. Zach's name was mentioned a few times, and a guy named Hunter and his brothers. Or maybe Zach's brothers? She reached the part where Briar nearly died. Then she was with the others fighting cultists at some altar. Her words faltered, and she hiccuped while trying to spit out the rest of what she'd clearly been holding back for far too long.
I killed them, you know. I helped take them down, but I killed people. And I was nearly killed, and that damned explosion and the whole showdown with Briar's sister and Cylon.
She hiccuped again.
And now I keep having nightmares. And I thought I had them under control. They keep coming back, and my summoning, I can't use it. I'm so scared every time I try that some undead asshole is going to pop out of the ground, or another Xylon will show up, and I'll have to kill someone again, and...
She cut herself off and disentangled herself from my arms. She fell back on her butt, then rushed to get to her feet. She started to run off, but I snagged her hand, pulling her gently to a stop. Hold on a second. I just need a minute to catch up here.
No, you don't, because you didn't need all that dumped on you,
she argued and tugged her hand free. She turned away again, but I rushed around, blocking her path.
Jack, please. We hardly know each other, and I just unloaded over a year's worth of baggage on you. That's not even remotely fair. You probably think I'm crazy now.
Not crazy, but if you don't slow down and take a breath, you're gonna pass out. She had her mouth open, probably to keep ranting, but breathed instead. She was still shaking, and I eased toward her. I slipped my arms around her and drew her into a hug. It took a second, then she was squeezing me back.
I don't understand why you're not running off,
she murmured. Why would I? So you went through some shit, and you're still working your way through it. That's not a reason for me to leave you alone. She pulled away and stared up at me. The quizzical look on her face put a smile on mine.
I don't understand anything that's happening right now.
Which part?
This. You and me and whatever this is between us. It's all so fast, and I'm a mess. A real mess.
Will it help if I tell you I don't understand anything either? Or that I don't care to? Oh man, what was I doing? I needed to stop talking, but it was impossible around her.
It doesn't freak you out?
She asked. It scares me a little, if I'm going to be honest, but only because I've never felt anything like this about anyone, I said sincerely. It's like I've known you for years, and being around you is as easy as simply being alive. Fire pooled in my palms and moved lazily around her body. She sighed and stole more of my heart, trusting me as she did. I've spent enough time questioning things in my life. I'm willing to go on a little faith here, if you are.
It still sounds insane,
she argued, but it was half-hearted at best. Sounds pretty normal for you, I teased, and she groaned, letting her head fall into my chest.
I can't believe I said all that. I'm so sorry.
For what? I want to hear about it, all of it. Whatever will help you get through these nightmares tormenting you. Talking through it might help you with your summoning, too.
You're not the first person to tell me that.
Why do you sound so upset about it?
Because,
she said, pushing away from me and pacing near the lake's edge.
What I went through, what I had to do, it's not nearly as bad as what others did.
And you think that means you don't have a right to be affected by it? She pulled her sleeves down so they covered her hands and shrugged.
It doesn't feel like I should get to complain.
I went to her again and sought out her hands so I could hold them. From what you just told me, you went through hell, just like everyone else did. You had to take lives, and that's never easy. Her eyes narrowed a hint at my words, and I mentally kicked myself to watch what I said. I might not have killed anyone, but I'd beaten a few assholes badly enough. They could have died. Then there was the fact I was plotting to murder my brother and Gabriel once I found them. Roughly, I cleared my throat and focused back on Nyala. All I'm saying is, if your friends care for you as much as I'm betting they do, they wouldn't want you tormenting yourself by bottling up so much. They'd want you to talk about it, find a way through it, and be able to use your summoning without being afraid. Nyala's aggravated frown said I was right.
Briar would be kicking my ass right now.
I raised her chin enough so I could look into her eyes. I'm here for you, whatever you need. If you need to rant, you rant. If you need to cry, cry. And if you want someone to help you with your summoning, I might be fire, but I can help with that too. She sucked in a breath, ready to speak, but my fingers on her lips stopped her. And if you're going to ask me why again, I'll tell you again. It's because I like you, Nyala. I like you a lot, I said, noting the hitch in my voice. So how about we grab some food and you decide if you want to talk anymore tonight about anything, or if you want to simply enjoy a peaceful meal with me. She screwed her smile to the side. I held my breath, worried she was going to walk away. Then she hugged me once more, tucked her hand in the crook of my elbow, and we made our way to the main building. She seemed better, though her slightly panicked gaze gave away her unease. I'd work on getting rid of that during dinner. And then what? You heard everything she just told you. She's friends with Derek Morse's daughter. If anyone can lead you to the dagger, it's Briar through Nyala. She could be the key you've been missing to find the damn thing. The thought left me cold, but only for a moment. A rising wave of heat flowed through me, and my decision was made. No matter what connection Nyala had to Briar or the dagger, I wasn't going to use her as I'd been used. So much had been stolen from me. Some was my fault, and the rest was the work of bastards seeking power. I would not lose what might be the only good thing I had left to my foolishness. I should have been doing everything I could to stay away from Nyala. That was going to be nearly impossible. I'd do what I could to keep her out of danger, and if it became too hard, if she was about to get pulled in with me, then and only then would I break it off. There'd be no goodbyes, no drawn-out excuses for why I was leaving. I'd just have to pick up and go. It'd be for the best. I would not have her blood on my hands. I would not watch Nyala die. The following night, I was alone at Academy. Nyala had taken the weekend to spend some time in Silent Heights. I might have had something to do with that idea. Figuring a couple of days away from this place might do her some good and give her a chance to breathe. Mostly it was for her sake. And the rest? I needed a chance to sneak around more of the campus without worrying she'd catch me. I was still at war with myself for what I felt for her and the stupid game I was playing. In a perfect world, I'd find the dagger, lift the curse, and avenge my family without Nyala having to know any of it. Or without me putting her life at risk. But this wasn't a perfect world, and she'd been through hell once. What right did I have to drag her through another one? I buried my hands in my jacket pockets and took another lap around the grounds. It was late, but a few students were still hanging around. I kept to the trees and out of sight, waiting for the last ones to head inside finally. 2 buildings were off limits to students. Once the grounds were clear, I stuck to the shadows as much as possible and made for the first structure, housing the artifact collection. This one held items that, from what information I'd gathered, weren't allowed to be seen by anyone. I'd already made a plan of how to break into the other building. I hadn't had a chance to scope this one out yet. That's what tonight was for. It was a 1-story stone building with 6 sides. Stained glass windows were set every 10 feet. I tried peering through them already. They were enchanted, though, so it was impossible to see beyond the colored glass. Checking my surroundings every few seconds, I walked the perimeter of the building. Magic pulsed from within these walls. They were warded, but there was more to it. I tested the handle at the only visible door, and was not surprised to find it locked. A locked door hadn't been enough to stop me yet. Figuring there was no time like right now, I reached for the lockpick in my pocket and started to pull on my summoning to counteract the warding. It was heavy, but I'd spent my teenage years sneaking into tombs bearing ancient curses. This level of warding was child's play. The soft crunching of gravel caught my ear, and the wind fluttered around me. Shoving my lockpick into my pocket and hurrying away from the door, I darted to the closest path, making it look like I was returning to the dormitories after being near the gardens. 2 figures stepped into my path. "Something we can help you with?" the one on the right asked. His smile was polite enough, but there was a warning in his blue eyes. The man beside him had a similar face, and the eyes matched. Brothers, I assumed. From their uniforms, they were part of the military unit stationed on campus, the Talons. It was good that my hands were tucked out of sight, or they would have seen the flames flickering at my fingertips. "Nope, I was just taking a walk," I said as casually as possible. They nodded and parted so I could move past them. "Be sure you keep your next walk to the trails and not poking around buildings that are off limits to students," the one with the reddish hair warned, keeping a smile on his face. I kept going, merely nodding at his words. I hated military summoners. I dealt with enough of them over the years to know most of them weren't worth trusting. If they figured out what I was looking for, my chances of getting a hold of that dagger would vanish. Who knew who they reported to, how corrupt their leader was, and if, by chance, they had any connection to General Erickson? I couldn't let her know of my plans. "Just be more careful," I scolded myself. "Your life depends on it."
Chapter 5. Nyala.
"You're getting inside your head too much again,"
Jack said softly, while he stood behind me. I know.
"Nyala, you're safe here. No one is going to come popping out of the ground to attack you. And even if they did, they'd have to get through me first."
I glanced over my shoulder, noting how serious he was. He was smiling, but flames had ignited in his eyes. I know you would, and I know we're not under attack. The memories just keep taunting me.
Then think of something else. Acknowledge that they're there, that it happened, and remind yourself that it's in the past. You're here now, in this moment.
He gave my arms a gentle massaging squeeze, then let me go. This was how every evening this week had gone. Jack was an exceptionally good teacher. The way he talked me through these moments when the memories became too much had helped more than I'd expected it to. Someone who hadn't seen some of the evil or been through their own trauma would never have been able to sound like that. Would know how I felt without me having to say a word. I'd wanted to push him for answers about his past again, but we had grown closer these past few days. I sensed he'd tell me when he was ready. He just might not blurt it all out at once, as I had. We were on the edge of the lake. It was evening, and most students had gone inside. Jack had found me out here once again, attempting to get my summoning to work. I hadn't had another meltdown, but I had to admit, I was getting close to that point. Another week had almost come and gone at Academy. After I'd turned into a blubbering mess in his arms, I'd gone away to Silent Heights for the weekend, expecting Jack not to want anything to do with me when I returned. The car had pulled up to the main building Sunday evening, and Jack had stood there waiting for me. He'd had a smile on his face. The second I'd been free of the back seat, he'd taken my hand and pulled me into a tight, warm hug that I could have easily disappeared into for a few hours. That was probably my favorite thing right now, his hugs. Water pooled in my palms, and I jumped, then let out a laugh.
"What were you thinking about this time?"
he asked. Nothing much." The water swirled faster in my hands, then slipped to cover them in thin, delicate streams.
"Nothing at all?"
I heard the smile in his voice. His heat pressed comfortably against my back. He came closer and kissed my shoulder, bare thanks to the oversized sweater I had on. The streams of water thickened and coiled up to my wrists. "Nope," I blurted. He kissed my shoulder again, and warmth spread over me from the smallest of flames winding its way about my torso. His lips moved to my neck, and I melted into him. His arms slipped around my waist and pulled me back into the safety of his chest. Then he was pulling away, and I huffed at him. He chuckled and took another step back.
"Let's see what else you've got,"
he said, nodding to my hands and the water swirling around my fingers and wrists. I gave him one last heated look, then returned my attention to the water under my control. It felt good to have it in my hand again. I went through the movements I'd learned my first semester here. The water expanded out from my body, swirling through the air, and gathering in strength while I pulled more and more to it. Soon I was creating works of art in the air with glittering bits of ice that rained down on us. The cold pinpricks dotted my cheeks, and I spread my arms wide, embracing my magic. In the very back of my mind, I sensed a foreboding that danger was coming. I acknowledged that feeling. Then I reminded myself I was safe. Academy was safe. Everyone I cared for was safe. The foreboding faded, and I spun around to face Jack. He had a strange look on his face. His lips were parted, and his eyes glimmered with heat. "What?" I asked. "Did you know how breathtaking you look right now? You're like a damned water spirit." He beamed at me while his eyes danced over my hair. I must have had tiny flecks of ice lingering in the strands. Heat flooded my face, and I shrugged, unsure of what to do with him. Not even Roger had ever looked at me the way Jack was. It ignited a frenzied storm inside me. Laughing and figuring it was time I listened to what I wanted instead of fighting it, I took hold of Jack's hand and dragged him behind me while I set off away from the lake. Our laughter floated through the air as we hurried to reach the gardens and the privacy they offered. Once we were out of sight and tucked in a small grove of trees, I pulled Jack into my arms and kissed him. "We should go get some food," he murmured against my lips. "Dinner can wait." He grunted in agreement, gently eased my back against a tree, and kissed me until my toes were curling and frost covered me almost from head to toe. He took a second to marvel at the sweeping swirls and shimmering patterns, then kissed me again, and any thought of leaving this spot for a while vanished. I sat in the living room of my quarters the following evening, lounging on the couch and catching up with Briar through a video call. She and Zach were somewhere in Scotland now. "You're glowing. You know that, right?" Briar told me. "What? No, I'm not." "Yeah, you are," she said through her laughter. She was sitting on a balcony of some castle. It was already late there, but she'd wanted to catch up with me, so she'd stepped outside. Zach was passed out in their room. She was wearing that man ragged with their adventures, and I was sure he loved every second of it. "I want all the details." "I mean, I'm not sure what to tell you." "That's bullshit. Come on, give me something. He's clearly better than Roger." She waggled her eyebrows much as Hunter had, and I rolled my eyes. "He's that good of a kisser, huh?" "You have no idea. But it's not just about that. I mean, we do that a lot. All the time," I said while my pulse raced and my heart fluttered. "I've never been around someone who makes me feel that jittery in a good way. And safe and so damn happy. I keep thinking it's just me overreacting, but he told me he felt the same." "He did?" "Yeah. It was after never mind." "After what?" Briar sat up straighter. I sensed her sudden mood change all the way over here. "Is something else going on you're not telling me?" "No, why would you think that?" "Because the last time Zach talked to Hunter, he mentioned you but cut himself off like he wasn't supposed to be saying anything. What's going on? Is it about Jack?" I shook my head. "I didn't want to freak you out." "Yeah, well, you're making me do that now." "I know," I muttered and gave in. "I'm sorry. There are a few things I've been keeping from you." I started talking, and soon I was telling Briar everything I'd been dealing with since this mess ended with Xylon. The nightmares and the way they affected my summoning, how I'd been so terrified to use my magic that it paralyzed me, how I hadn't used it at all last semester or over the summer. Once I finished, Briar stared back at me with a blank face. The flames erupted in her eyes, and she stood up. "We're coming home," she announced. "What? No! Don't you dare end your trip early because of me." "Why not? I know what you did for me, and it was way more than giving up the last few months of a vacation. We're coming home, and I'm going to be there for you like I should have been this last year." "This is why I didn't tell you," I informed her. "Briar, seriously, stop." She looked so torn at that moment, and I loved her even more for it. "I should be there with you." "You should be enjoying your life." "I knew something else was wrong," she muttered. "More than just Roger being a dickhead." I laughed at the venom in her words. "Yeah, well, what can I say? I've gotten good at keeping secrets." "I think I rubbed off on you too well." Look, I appreciate you wanting to rush here, but I'm doing better. She sat back down, a smile playing on her lips.
I'm gonna guess that has to do with Jack?
My face burned, and I shrugged. A bit. He has a way with words. He's been helping me with my summoning again, and dealing with everything else that comes up.
I told her about my meltdown at the lake, and how Jack hadn't run away or freaked out. He sounds like a great guy, she mused. I think he's a keeper.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too, I admitted.
I was gonna say more, but Briar avoided meeting my eye.
What?
Huh? Nothing. It's nothing.
Really?
She hung her head. All right, I don't want you to get upset or have what I'm about to tell you ruin anything. Jack does sound amazing, and that he genuinely cares for you and is good for you.
But?
I asked, hating how my stomach churned. She cringed. But Luke and Nick caught a student near one of the buildings that's housing some of the more powerful items that have been at Academy for years. After what happened, they're keeping them under lock and key.
Okay,
I said slowly.
Why are you telling me this?
Well, as I said the other night, they ran into a student on that path. He was acting a bit odd.
Did they say who it was?
I asked, even though I already knew. She wouldn't be telling me if it was simply some nosy, stupid first year. They didn't say he was trying to break in or anything, she said in a rush, admitting without having to say a word that yes, it was indeed Jack they'd run into. Just it seemed weird is all.
He's got the same interests I have, I said. Maybe he was trying to take a peek through the windows, see what's in there? He's about as curious as I am about artifacts and relics. You'd make fun of him for how animated he can get.
Just like you do, she said with a smile, then sighed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have told you.
No, it's fine. I mean, if he's poking around a building he shouldn't have been, that does seem strange. I knew Jack had been hiding something from me. I thought it had to do with his family. I'd wanted to push, but if he'd gone through some traumatic event, being forced to talk about it wouldn't do him any good. Then there were the times I'd seen him go into fits of coughing. Those had me more worried than what he was avoiding telling me about himself or his past. I'd left out those parts when Briar asked me about Jack. Telling someone else about how sick he appeared felt too personal, especially when I was still attempting to put the pieces together. I slumped on the couch and glared at the ceiling. Maybe I shouldn't have let myself get this attached this fast.
What does your gut tell you about him?
I puffed out my cheeks and focused on what I felt each time I thought of Jack. That I can trust him, I said with total conviction.
Then I say trust your gut,
Briar said firmly.
Nick and Luke have been paranoid since everything that went down. I'm sure Jack was out for a walk and ended up on that path, or, as you said, he's just overly curious. It's not as if they caught him attempting to break in the front door.
Yeah, you're probably right. I sat up again. We'd all been more suspicious of every situation this past year. All right, enough about my shit. Tell me what else you two have been up to over there.
An hour later, I finally got off the video call with Briar. Not even close to tired, I thought about texting Jack to see what he was up to. But it was late, and he'd seemed exhausted at dinner. He'd said his practical fire summoning classes had worn him out. Waking him up wasn't something I wanted to do if he was that worn out. I did have a research project I was supposed to be working on. Having Jack helping me with my summoning had put me behind on my studies. Not that I minded when it meant using my magic and spending time with him. The library would be empty this time of night, which is how I liked it best. I slipped into my flats, tugged on a knit purple jacket with stars since the library was always frigid, and left my quarters with a list in hand of texts I needed to find. On my walk through the dormitories, out to the ground, then to the main building where the entrance to the library was, I replayed my conversation with Briar. Why would Jack have been trying to get into that building if that's what he'd been up to? Overreacting, I told myself when I entered the library and descended to the lower levels. That's all it is. Don't create a problem where there isn't one. I wandered through the shelves, found 2 of the books I needed, then headed for the stairs to go down another level. The library was deserted, and I enjoyed the quiet. I was hunting down the last book and was about to turn down another row. That was when I heard it. The cursing came first, followed by a round of coughing. I peered around the end of the shelf,
Jack was hunched over while the fit took hold. He kicked the bottom shelf angrily, and fire sprouted at his hands. When the fit finally ended, I started to move toward him. Then I saw his hand, the hand that had been over his mouth. It was covered in blood. "Jack," I uttered before I could stop myself. He whipped around, shoving that hand behind his back.
"Nyala, what are you doing down here so late?"
He was trying to smile, but it kept faltering. He cleared his throat several times, like he was fighting off another fit. "Are you all right?" I asked.
"Yeah, I just forgot there was something I had to find for a paper I'm working on."
"And the coughing? That doesn't seem like you're getting over a cold." I reached for him, but he stepped back.
"I told you it's nothing."
His tone was clipped, and regret burned in his gaze.
"I'm sorry, it's late, and I should get back to my quarters to get some sleep. I'll just have to go without that book."
He moved to go by me, then stopped and leaned down to kiss my cheek.
"I'll see you tomorrow, okay?"
"Yeah, tomorrow," I murmured. He hurried off. At the end of the row, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his hand. He didn't even reach the steps. Then another coughing fit had him. I started to go after him, but forced myself to stop. Jack was sick. That had to be what he'd been keeping from me. But why? And why not tell me? Unless... Oh, shit. My heart plummeted, and I sank against the bookshelf closest to me. Unless it was that bad. Unless he was scared to tell me because it wasn't going to get better. My thoughts started to take off with me, but I stopped them before they could go too far. I would just ask him and be done with it. And try not to have what might be a great relationship blow up in your face, I whispered in the silence of the library. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Chapter 6. Jack.
Flames flickered and sputtered around the coffee mug I clutched between my hands. I coughed, attempting to clear my throat without breaking into a hacking fit in the dining hall. I had a full day of practical classes today. Somehow I doubted I'd make it through the morning. I'd hardly slept in days. The curse was worsening faster than it ever had before. I could barely go a few hours now without feeling as if I was going to cough up my lungs. The sensation of shards of glass in my lungs each time I breathed was becoming a constant. Right now it was merely uncomfortable most of the day. I was meant to have more time. Yet I felt 100 times worse than when I first arrived at Academy. Eventually, the pain would become unbearable. There'd come a time when I wouldn't be able to stop coughing as quickly as I did. I'd be bringing up far more blood until I was choking on it, and my lungs would feel as if someone was stabbing me in the chest repeatedly. There'd be hallucinations, too, horrible ones that would leave me seeing living nightmares. That's what I had to look forward to. The mug cracked and coffee spilled onto the table. I jumped upright, the brown liquid flowing freely across the table until an invisible barrier halted it. It swirled back on itself, was lifted into the mug, and froze. A calming, cooling sensation reached me from across the table. Nyala's worried frown filled my vision.
Jack?
"Hey," I said to her. Since she'd come across me in the library last week, I'd been doing what I could to avoid her. She'd tried to ask me a few times about the coughing, but I'd brushed off her worries each time and took off as she asked any questions. Being apart from her was nearly as painful as this damn curse. If I had to walk away from her for her sake, I wasn't sure I could do it anymore, not without breaking myself in the process, which was insane. I'd told myself that night after night. Did I listen to the warnings? Nope, of course not. Nyala came toward me, and I rocked back on my heels for a second, ready to take off, but her tantalizing scent flowed around me, and I needed her too badly to resist. I hauled her into my arms. She hugged me back, squeezing me as if she could remove the curse that way. Not that she knew I was cursed, but there was no more hiding that I was battling a sickness. And as if it had to remind me it was there, the pain worsened in my chest, as it always did before a fit. Quickly, I kissed her cheek and pulled back. "I should get going," I rasped, then cleared my throat. "I'll see you later." When I passed her, our hands brushed. She wound her fingers about mine for a second. Then she let me go, and I nearly ran out of the hall and back to my quarters. The second my door closed behind me, I fell to my knees. Dizzy from the coughing, I fumbled to get to the couch. Blood filled my mouth and dotted my lips. For a horrifying few seconds, I couldn't get any air into my lungs. The stabbing pain nearly had me shouting. I hunched over on the floor, spewing curses in between the hacking. I crawled forward, but never reached the couch. A shudder of exhaustion struck my limbs. I collapsed to the floor, wondering if I'd been wrong about how much time I had left. I yanked against the magical bond created from streams of water, keeping my hands pinned behind my back. "You piece of shit!" I shouted, earning a punch to the gut. I gasped, doubling over until a set of rough hands jerked me upright again. I spat at the feet of the asshole who'd broken into my family's home. Gabriel. He was dressed in his knee-length brown leather coat and had his long hair dragged back in a leather band. Wind whipped around the living room, pictures rattled on the walls, and 2 of the mirrors fell off their hooks, shattering on the stone floor. Hatred and greed shimmered in his eyes while he leered down at me. "Oh, Jack," he crooned and crouched in front of me. "Did you think you could steal from me all these years and not have to pay the price?" He backhanded me, and blood oozed from my nose. "Did you think you could steal from so many powerful people and simply get on with your life?" "Those items don't belong to you," I snapped, wrenching my arms to get free, though it did me little good. "And they sure as hell don't belong to those corrupt assholes you sold them to." "You should stop speaking as if you're some valiant hero. You're a thief, one of the best out there. Why not join me instead of fighting against me, eh? You could be a great asset to my team. And I take care of those who work for me. If you don't believe me, ask your brother." "You're lying," I uttered. "Where do you think he's been all this time?" Gabriel grabbed a handful of my hair and jerked my head back. "How do you think I found your home? Got past the warding? You can thank chance for letting me in the front door to your family's precious sanctuary." I lunged for him, but the water around my wrists tightened and turned to ice, stabbing into my skin. Gabriel sighed, then straightened. He snapped his fingers, and my parents' shouting echoed from down the hallway. 4 goons dragged my mom, then my dad to the living room. From the dried blood on their faces, both had been worked over. I scrambled to reach them, and they did the same toward me. Gabriel punched me in the gut again, then brought his knee up, smashing it into my face. I collapsed to the floor. "Let him go! Please, just let him go!" Dad yelled. "Why should I listen to you?" Gabriel asked, sounding bored. "The Scott family has done nothing but cause trouble to my associates and me for years. That's gonna end tonight." The front door opened, and 4 more figures stepped inside. At the sight of the woman in her black coat, I froze. I knew it. I knew she was working with Gabriel. General Elena Erickson stood beside Gabriel, taking in the scene of my parents and me held at his mercy. Her 3 guards flanked her. For years, my parents fought to prove she was tied to the black market trading of magical items, but there was never any evidence. "You bitch," Mom whispered, glaring at the woman. General Erickson's brow arched. "As if I haven't been called that before." She turned to Gabriel. "Have you searched the house yet?" "We have. It's all here, just as he said it would be," Gabriel replied. Chance. Had he really turned traitor? Just like that? Why? "Good. Finish up here so we can be done with this business tonight. We're expected elsewhere." General Erickson glanced at us all in turn, then exited the house, taking our 3 guards with her. "You heard the boss," Gabriel told his goons. "Let's move." He came toward me and pulled a small item from his pocket. "Chance left a gift for you. I'm afraid your end won't be as swift as your parents'. He wanted you to suffer." Mom and Dad were back to yelling, but their summoning couldn't manifest. Gabriel had done something to them. They shouted for me, and I turned toward them, but Gabriel jerked me back. He reached around and pressed something small and round into my hand. Dad bellowed, begging Gabriel to stop. But it was too late. Power, burning hotter than my fire and stabbing like 1,000 needles, exploded through me. Gabriel's fist collided with my face, and I slipped into darkness. I jerked upright, confused at where I was. This wasn't my house, was it? No, it was too small and cramped. Agony crashed into me, and I fell back. Clutching a hand to my chest, I waited for the fit to come. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as the one that knocked me out. Once it was over, my limbs trembled with weakness. Blood was smeared over my hand. I did what I could not to wipe it on the couch while I used it to get myself upright. Stumbling, I made it down the short hall to the bathroom and flipped on the light. Crimson coated my chin and speckled my cheeks. I turned on the faucet and splashed water onto my face. The basin became stained red. I gripped the edge of the counter while flashes of that night assaulted me. I'd come down on the floor of the living room, clutching that damn medallion in my hand. I'd known what it was the moment Gabriel placed it in my hand. It was an item I'd stolen from him years before, hoping to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. It had been tucked away in the vault in our home. But Gabriel had gotten to it and had passed it to me. The medallion, which bore a sigil for a curse on one side and 1,000 daggers piercing a heart on the other, had been cracked down the middle, a sign the curse had been passed on. That hadn't been the worst of it. The worst part had been rolling over and staring into the dead eyes of my parents. Their throats had been slit, and their blood had soaked into the beige rug. Fire erupted from my hands and swarmed the bathroom. No one had believed my story about who'd been at the house that night. How could a general ever be blamed for such atrocities? And Gabriel? There'd never been any trail leading back to him or my brother. The case remained open and unsolved. I'd stayed at the house long enough to tear through my parents' journals and notes. I'd packed up what I needed, placed a new magical lock on the door to ensure no one could get inside, and I hadn't looked back. I hadn't been back since. I couldn't bear to step through the front door. The fire summoned by my fury died out once another coughing fit racked my body. I slumped over the counter, then kicked the wall, imagining it was Gabriel's face instead. When it finally ended, I weakly shuffled out of the bathroom and searched for my phone. There were several texts from Nyala asking if I was all right and if I needed her to bring me any food from dinner. Dinner? I glanced at the windows and cursed even more. Night had fallen. I'd been out the entire day. I texted her back that I was fine and I'd see her tomorrow, knowing that one of these days she would not be so easily swayed by my vague replies. There were no other messages from Gregory or my other black market contacts. Furious at the lack of information on the dagger, Chance, or Gabriel's whereabouts, I paced around the room. I had to get into those 2 buildings with the artifacts and figure out if the dagger was there. I was in no shape for a breaking and entering tonight. But tomorrow. I could do it tomorrow. Flames sprouted from my hands with every furious step I took around and around the living room. Another day had come and gone. I'd barely managed to avoid seeing Nyala and had prepared for my break-in to the 2 buildings. The warding around each had been more complex than I'd expected, but I'd gotten through. And what did I find? No dagger. It wasn't there in either building, waiting for me to steal it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. A headache had formed behind my eyes, competing with the pain in my chest. You know what you need to do now. Gregory hasn't given you any new leads, but you have someone close to the Morris family. Talk to her already. Get it over with. No, I snapped at myself. You talk to her, then she gets dragged into this mess with you. And if she's the only way to find the dagger, what's more important, your life and vengeance, or a relationship with someone you met weeks ago? I stomped to the windows and glowered at my haggard reflection looking back at me. How had I found myself in this mess? Why had I let myself get tangled up with someone? Exhaustion tugged at me, and I decided I'd figure out my next move tomorrow. There had to be more hidden locations on campus I hadn't found yet. I had the weekend to hide in my quarters and sleep. Maybe when I woke up, there'd be more news from Gregory. Halfway to my room, a knock sounded at my door. It was after 1 a.m. Shit. Had someone seen me break into those buildings? I'd kept an eye out for any patrolling talons and hadn't noticed anyone. I held my breath, waiting. Then the knock came again.
Jack, open the door,
Nyala called out, and my shoulders slumped. I held my breath and counted off the seconds, waiting for her to go away.
Look, I know you're in there, all right? I saw you coming back. Can we just talk for a second, please?
Once again, I was moving without realizing it, and yanked the door open. Nyala's bright eyes darkened with worry.
Are you all right?
Great.
Yeah, sure you are. That's why you look like death and have been avoiding me as much as possible.
She snapped for the first time ever since I'd met her. Frost glistened around her hands, and the temperature plummeted. The cold coming off her was even enough to temper the heat that had been pulsing off me for hours. She was angry, but beneath it, I sensed her fear. Fear for me. I swallowed hard, attempting to come up with the words that said we should end this before it went any further. They were right there. Nervously, I licked my lips, working up the nerve to spit them out and be done with it. But that was the last thing I wanted. What I wanted desperately was to drag Nyala into my arms and kiss her until the damn sun came up. There was no reason for it other than, somehow, in the span of mere weeks, she'd stolen my heart and wound her way about my soul. Gods, this was impossible. Why had I let myself talk to her that first day? Why? What good would this relationship do either of us in the end when I failed? I imagined Nyala at that moment, not looking at me in fear but in grief. Her hate would be better than forcing her to endure looking at my corpse. Just as I built up the strength to tell her it was over, that I wasn't who she thought, and it was time to leave each other be, she pushed her way past me and into the living room. Sighing, I closed the door and turned to face her. Nyala,
whatever you're about to say to me, just hold on, okay?
She cut me off.
I unloaded a lot on you. I know that. And you've been helping me with my summoning and dealing with the nightmares and moving on with my life. If you think for one damn second I'm not ready to be there for you in the same way, you're wrong.
She tucked her hands into the sleeves of her maroon sweater and walked further into the space. That's not what I believe. She whirled around, sending her hair flying out of its loose braid.
No? Then what have you been doing? Why are you pushing me away?
You know what you have to do. Either use her to get intel or cut her loose before it's too late. I don't have a choice, I exclaimed. Her brow shot up and she crossed her arms. Frost glistened over her sweater and reached her neck. Her eyes were glacial now, too, and the temperature continued to drop.
And why is that? Choice about what? Tell me what's going on with you.
It's complicated, all right? Everything is complicated. Meeting you complicated everything. I ranted, then wanted to kick myself after I realized what I just said.
And you think having you in my life didn't complicate mine?
She said, her tone even while her eyes became even colder.
That it didn't make me question every decision I'm making. Did you think you're the only one who's been out of sorts?
Careful. I had to be so damn careful not to slip and say too much. While I searched for the right words, Nyala came toward me, one measured step at a time.
If you want this to be over, then tell me, and I'll walk out that door.
My chest clenched, and my heart pounded in protest. This was a way out for both our sakes. Then, once I dealt with the curse and my brother and it was safe, I could come back. I could tell her everything. And we could try again. It was the best option. The only option. But again, the words I urgently needed to say wouldn't come.
Is this because you're sick?
I told you, it's just a bad cold, I said, but she was shaking her head.
I saw the blood,
she whispered.
Jack, if you're that sick, just tell me. Maybe there's something I can do to help you, but you don't have to push me away no matter how serious it is.
She reached out for my hand and held it fast. Her coldness mingled with my heat, soothing the fires that felt as if they'd been raging inside me for days. You can't, I breathed.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. I stepped back, and she moved with me. "Nyala," I whispered. Then she cupped my cheek. Frost spread from her skin to mine, and I leaned into her palm. I imagined hauling her against my chest and kissing her as I'd wanted to do for days. But reality kicked in the second that pain started in my chest. I jerked out of reach and stormed to the other side of the room. This was madness. No one felt this intensely this fast, right? How could they stand it?
"Even if there's nothing I can do," she murmured, "there's no reason for you to be alone while you're dealing with a sickness, whatever it is."
"You don't understand. You can't."
"I could if you'd talk to me."
"Nyala, please."
"You helped me, Jack, more than you can possibly realize. You can't expect me to up and leave you when it's obvious you're not doing okay."
She came closer, but kept a couple of feet between us. She tilted her head then, studying me.
"Does your family know you're sick? Is that why you won't talk to them? Or about them?"
Flashes of that night returned to me. I saw my parents dead on the floor, their mouths frozen open on their dying screams, and their eyes. So much hatred and fear and grief in their dead eyes. I staggered back, cursing under my breath. The image vanished. I raised my head and froze. Nyala stood before me, but there was a gaping wound at her throat, and her eyes were lifeless. Fire spewed from my palms like two small waterfalls, then splashed against my legs.
"Jack!"
I heard Nyala's voice, but her mouth wasn't moving, not while I stared at it. Agony exploded in my chest, and with it came a coughing fit. I fell into the wall behind me. Nyala's soothing touch materialized on my forehead and arm while she held me up. I covered my mouth with my hand, feeling my body grow weaker by the second.
"Let's get you to the couch so you can sit down,"
Nyala said firmly, and started to guide me there. I wrenched myself away from her. "No," I rasped through the coughing. At least this time when I looked at her, the nightmarish image of her corpse was gone. It could come back, and next time, it might not just be a hallucination caused by the curse. "Please, I need you to leave."
"Jack!"
"Out!" I snapped through the coughing. "Get out, please!" She hesitated, then marched for the door, leaving a trail of frost on the floor in her wake.
"I'm not giving up on you. Know that."
"You shouldn't want to be with me."
"Give me a reason."
"I can't," I muttered, hating the hurt creeping into her eyes. "I just can't. I'm sorry." I closed the door, then sank to the floor before it while the fit took hold of me. I sensed Nyala's presence linger on the other side of the door. For a moment, it was like she'd pressed her back to it, right where mine was. Eventually, the coughing stopped, and I dragged myself upright. When I spun around, the bit of air I'd gotten back into my lungs seeped out. My entire door was covered in frost. It mingled with the tiny flames seeping from my body, their orange light highlighting the delicate swirls and twists of ice. "Not possible," I whispered to the emptiness surrounding me. "Fairy tales aren't real." But horror stories are. I backed away from the door and headed to the bedroom.
Chapter 7. Nyala. I added 3 more books to the stack already on the table. I'd been in the library every moment I could spare the entire weekend. The rest of the week was the same. It was now Thursday, and I was doing my best to find every piece of information Academy had relating to the sicknesses of the lungs, magical diseases, and curses. My pile of notes far exceeded any I'd taken for any class here for the last 2+ years. Every night I dragged my butt to bed with my head spinning. Narrowing down what was afflicting Jack was nearly impossible without him telling me all his symptoms. Going off of what I'd witnessed led me to lean more toward the magical disease area. Or worse, that someone had cursed him. Was that why he never spoke of his family? Had they had such a horrible falling out that they'd cursed him? That theory sounded ridiculous, or would have if he hadn't sounded so off whenever his family was mentioned, or the sickness. If he was just sick, even if it was terminal, I sensed he would have told me after I'd shown up at his place the other night. I slammed another book shut and raked my fingers through my hair, messing it up. If only I was like Briar and could simply pop into his thoughts, I muttered to my empty corner of the library. Then I'd find out everything and get it over with. I huffed and slumped in my chair, Too bad I wouldn't do that. I was too nice. And sometimes that felt like a curse. I tapped my fingers atop my handwritten notes. When two other faces popped into my head, I paused. Briar had already said Nick and Luke had suspicions about Jack. Did I want to ask them to look into him? Or tell me what they'd already found out? Those two could dig up information on anyone. I used to be the kind of person who trusted easily and believed what people told me. Then Xylon and his cultists happened, and I saw evil everywhere. Jack wasn't evil, but he wasn't being honest either. He said he didn't have a choice, I whispered, tapping my fingers again until frost covered my notes. I quickly pulled little ice droplets into my hand and stood up. He has to be in some kind of trouble. And haven't you had enough trouble in your life lately? You said you wanted a nice, quiet semester. Maybe letting this go, letting Jack push you away, is for the best. He did say you complicated everything. Yeah, I did, I said to myself, packing up my notes and shoving the new books I'd pulled from the shelves in there with them. But I never said there was a bad thing. I recalled that argument nearly every day, playing it over and over while I hunted for clues, and each time I came to the part where I'd waited for him to tell me to leave, I remembered the fear that had appeared in his eyes. Right alongside it was the same amount of care I had for him, the same amount of passion that I hadn't been able to explain away. Whatever he wasn't telling me was because he was worried about what it would do to me. Slinging my heavy tote bag onto my shoulder, I continued my internal debate of going to Luke and Nick for help. I was on the lowest level of the library and grumbled about having to walk up 5 flights of stairs to the main floor. The walk would give me time to think, if nothing else. When I was near the steps, a thud echoed from the other end of the room, bouncing off the high ceiling and stone floor. I figured it was another student who simply dropped a stack of books. Then the harsh sounds of coughing came. My tote fell from my shoulder, and I ran through the stacks, following the noise that sounded like someone was dying. Before I spotted a familiar hunched-over form, I knew who it was. Several folders and loose pages were scattered throughout the aisle. Amid them all was Jack. He sounded like he could hardly breathe. He already had a handkerchief pressed to his mouth, stained with fresh blood. I grabbed his hand and placed my arm around his shoulders, holding him the best I could while the fit racked his body. I waited for him to push me away. Instead, he squeezed my hand. I sent soothing streams of water toward him, hoping to ease the agony shimmering in his fire-filled eyes. Cringing, he curled even more in on himself. The fit eventually stopped, and he sank to the floor, his back to the shelves. Each breath he sucked in was wheezy, and he was so damn pale. Blood dotted his lips and his chin. His eyes fluttered like he struggled to stay conscious. When he could open his eyes wider, they focused on me. Flames burned in their depths, but his hands had no matching fires. Seeing the blood on his face nearly sent me tumbling down into the memories I didn't want to visit tonight. "May I?" I asked, nodding to the handkerchief in his hand. His brow furrowed, but he held it out to me. Using my summoning, I dampened it with cool water, then knelt in front of him. Gently, I wiped at his skin until the blood was gone. I handed him back his handkerchief and started to stand up. He caught my hand, staring at how our fingers twined together as if without thought. Then he gave his head a shake and let me go. "Thanks for that," he murmured. I reached out to help him upright, but he waved me off. I bit back the scolding I wanted to give him, then stepped back to help scoop up everything he dropped instead. "I can get those." I shuffled a stack of pages together, then handed them to him, not before I'd noticed what they were. Files from the Academy archives. Those would hold lists of just about everything and everyone who'd had anything to do with this place. "I don't mind. What are you researching down here so late anyway?" "Nothing important." He picked up the rest of the papers and tucked them under his arm. "I should be asking you the same thing." "Just stuff?" His lips twitched. "Stuff, huh? Sounds exciting." "It can be." I wanted to ask if he was all right, but knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. "I was heading up for the night." "I was too, actually. Do you mind if I walk with you?" "So you'll walk with me, but you won't hang out with me in the dining hall anymore, or text me back, huh?" I said, keeping my tone light. I'd started walking, but his hand on my arm stopped me.
Nyala, listen,
No, it's fine. I cut him off, but not angrily. I know you're dealing with a lot, and I get it. If you don't want to talk, it's okay. But I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me we're done. Just know that. His throat bobbed, and I sensed the argument building. He sucked in a deep breath, let it out, and we continued on our way to the stairs. My tote bag waited for me right where I'd dropped it, and I hoisted it onto my shoulder. 2 books were sitting with their spines facing up so the titles were visible. With my foot on the bottom step, Jack grabbed hold of my elbow.
What are those?
He demanded. Books. What do they look like? I replied, attempting to sound nonchalant. He reached for the bag, but I stepped out of his reach and darted up the stairs. He called my name, hurrying up after me.
Why are you looking into curses?
Can't I have other interests besides artifacts and lore? I shot back.
Not when it's right after you yelled at me in my quarters about being sick.
He caught up to me on the main floor and gripped my elbow.
I can't have you getting involved with what's happening to me, all right?
The fear that deepened his tone competed with the anger I'd only glimpsed in his eyes once after I'd asked him about siblings.
Let it go.
And how am I supposed to do that? Just walk away after what I've seen? You're in pain, and you're suffering. I took hold of his hand and held it tightly in mine. Why won't you just tell me? He tried to turn away, but I held on harder.
Nyala.
No, I know what I feel for you. It terrifies me, I confessed. It does, but I'm not going to pretend I don't want to be with you, or that I care about you this much. It's crazy and unreal, but you said yourself that you're willing to give this a shot if I was. And I'm standing here telling you that I still am. I've seen so much evil in the last couple of years. I'm not going to give up on something this incredible. And you feel the same for me. If you didn't, you would have said so the other night. You wouldn't be standing here still holding my hand now. He remained right where he was, staring at me with fire in his eyes. You know I'm right, so why won't you tell me the truth?
There are things I'm just not ready to talk about, he exclaimed. They're tearing me apart every damn day, and I can't tell you about them. Not when you're dealing with your own shit. I'm not going to dump that burden on your shoulders. It's mine alone.
It doesn't have to be. You helped me. Let me help you.
No.
Why not? I asked, knowing I was repeating myself and not caring. This was more than he'd told me this far. Maybe if I kept at it, he'd finally let me in. I know I was a bit fragile there at the beginning of the semester, but I'm not going to break. I promise. He sucked in a shaky breath, then let it out. He leaned closer, our bodies touching, and stared so deeply into my eyes I became lost in his. Warm lips touched my cheek, and heat shot through me, swirling around the coolness of my magic. That's why, he whispered, his breath tickling my neck. Then he walked away. By the time my mind caught up with the moment, Jack was out the library's front doors. Cursing, I rushed to catch up to him, but he was nowhere in sight. Frustrated and angry and unable to get the frost to stop forming, melting, and reforming over my hands, I marched across the grounds and up to my quarters. Once inside, I let my tote bag slide off my shoulder and hit the floor. The night caught up with me, and frost shot out of my body, covering the floor and the door and the wall behind me. If only Briar saw you losing control of your summoning. I hung my head, then straightened and hunted for my phone in my bag. After seeing that Jack was searching through the archives and what he'd said to me or not said, I no longer felt I had a choice. He needed help. He might hate me for what I was about to do, but I wasn't going to sit back while he got worse. I had just found Luke's number and was ready to text him, but a knock at the door stilled my fingers. I set my phone on my tote bag and pulled the door open. Jack, His arms were around me, and his mouth on mine. I gasped in surprise, then sank into him. He backed me into the room, shut the door behind him, and hugged me close. I should stay away, he whispered against my lips, but I can't. Not from you. Then don't, I replied. His gaze met mine for 3 quick beats of my pounding heart. Then he kissed me again, like his life depended on it. Chapter 8. Jack.
I lifted Nyala off her feet and carried her through the living room until we reached the couch. I sat down with her on my lap and buried my hands in her hair, deepening the kiss. It was true what I'd told her. Staying away from her was torture. It went against every gut instinct I had. I was in trouble. I knew I was. But not talking to her this past week had nearly driven me mad. It hadn't helped that I'd hallucinated finding her dead body 3 times at last count. Or that I'd seen her held in Gabriel's clutches. After those moments, I'd had to rush off to find her and ensure she was safe and alive. Then there were the times I'd lost control of my fire summoning. That had been after I'd forced myself to avoid her in the dining hall or out on the grounds. Staying away was only making everything about this curse worse. So I'd be with her until the time came when I couldn't. Then and only then would I worry about how to tell her the truth. For now, I was going to be with the woman who'd stolen my heart with a single damn look, and screw the consequences. Nyala embraced me just as fiercely. She clung to my shoulders. Her laughter pulled out my own, and we sat on that couch, making out like teenagers for, hell, I wasn't sure how long. My t-shirt ended up on the floor at some point, and I was lying on the couch with her sprawled atop me. We broke apart to take a breather. "Gods, you're beautiful," I breathed, cupping her cheek in my fire-filled palm. Her eyes fluttered closed. Frost covered her hands, which were currently flattened against my chest. The swirling pattern slipped on my skin and spread. I shivered from the chill, then relaxed into the cold. She started to pull back, an apology on her lips. I sat up, kissing it away. "Don't apologize. It doesn't bother me, the cold. Besides, your summoning is incredible. Don't hide it away now that you've got it back." "I want to see it," I murmured, my lips moving languidly against hers. "I want to see all of it. I want whatever you have to offer."
"Ditto,"
she replied. Her cooler lips were soothing against the heat of my own. A tiny ribbon of fire joined her frost. It danced across my chest, then up her hands. I would have been more than content for the night to go on like this. A tickle started in the back of my throat, and the familiar ache erupted in my chest. I attempted to smother the cough, but couldn't. Nyala helped me sit upright, keeping her arm around my shoulders, while I hacked away. She only left my side long enough to bring me a box of tissues and a glass of water. There was no blood this time, though her concern for me shone in her eyes as vividly as it had when we'd been in the library. Then I'd been sure one of my lungs was going to get coughed up. "Thanks," I rasped once the fit had ended.
"That one didn't seem so bad."
Sometimes they're not. Without her cool touch on my chest, the pain was worse. Trying to face her, I took her palms and pressed them to my bare skin. "Do you mind?" She tilted her head, then her eyes lit up. Frost appeared on her hands. Slowly it trailed over my chest and down my ribs. I sighed at the relief it brought to the aching in my lungs I thought I'd be stuck with forever. "Thanks." She smiled, leaned in, and brushed her lips over mine, leaving Frost behind.
"Anytime."
I waited for her to push and ask for the truth again, but she didn't. We sat on the couch, her hands on my chest, not saying a word. The longer I looked into her eyes, the lighter they became. Soon they were tinged with a pale blue, as if ice had formed around her irises. The strangest sensation passed over and through me, like I could see a future beyond the curse. And in that future, standing by my side was Nyala, smiling and happy, her laughter surrounding me while we held each other close. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and I wondered what she was thinking right then. Was it as crazy as what I was? A buzzing noise interrupted my wandering thoughts. Nyala blinked and glanced at my pocket.
"Are you going to get that?"
she asked. I was going to say no, but the buzzing kept up. Whoever was trying to call me clearly wasn't going to leave me a message and be done with it. Reluctantly, I stood up, and Nyala's hands fell away from my chest. The frost lingered, though. I tugged my cell phone free and cursed. It figured Gregory would call me now. I need to talk to this person. I'm sorry."
"Is it about the stuff you won't talk to me about?"
she asked, standing up and handing me my shirt. I tugged my shirt on, then pulled her into a hug. "I promise soon I'll tell you everything." Why the hell did I just say that? It was a good thing she couldn't see my face right then. It probably looked like I was going to choke. After walking away from her in the library, I'd meant to stay away. And yet I'd found myself outside her door. And now I was making promises that I'd tell her the truth, even though knowing would only put her in more danger. Unless I found the dagger here in the next few days and lifted the curse. But that was only half the problem. Once Gabriel and Chance figured out I was still alive, they'd come for me and anyone standing next to me. Why couldn't anything be simple? I squeezed Nyala tighter, silently vowing that I'd keep her out of danger one way or another. I leaned back enough to kiss her. I would have dragged the moment out longer, but my phone buzzed again. I'll maybe see you this weekend, I told her, and backed for the door.
I think I'm going to head to my place in Silent Heights. You can come visit me out there if you want.
An entire weekend with Nyala would be nice. I could pretend I wasn't cursed and that I wasn't on a mission to avenge my parents by hunting down and killing my brother. If only. Somehow I kept my smile on my face until I left Nyala's room and shut the door securely behind me. Once I was back in my quarters, I called Gregory. It's about damn time, I snapped. Do you have any idea how much danger I'm putting my ass in here? Gregory grunted. If they find out what I'm doing for you, they're going to come after me next. Watch your tone, man. Or what? What more can you do to me? Gregory sighed. I heard him take a drag on the cigarette he probably had hanging out of his mouth, like always. The dagger was removed from Academy a little less than 2 years ago. I finally tracked down someone who had some decent intel. My stomach dropped. Shit, you're sure? Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't hear about it before, but you know how this shit works. Rumour has it that it was removed by Derek Morris himself and taken to his private estate. And where the hell is that? I'm not sure yet. He kept his private life, well, private. But, he went on, talking over my threat, I've already put feelers out there, so no need to lose your shit, all right? I'm working on it. And no one knows what we're up to. Not yet, but man, I've got to tell you, at some point they're going to figure it out. Not if you keep your mouth shut. Jack, listen, I know we're not exactly friends, but I like you. I don't want to see those bastards get their hands on you and rip you apart, Gregory said. Why are you saying this now? Because I want you to lift that curse, then stop. Don't try to go after Gabriel and his crew. Leave the general alone. Fire swarmed me at his words. How can you ask me to do that? They'll kill you. You're one person. You might have become a damn good thief over the years, but you're not a killer, and you don't want to be. So I'm supposed to do nothing. Don't you want a life? Nyala's face popped into my mind's eye, and the fire that had been ready to rage out of control settled so it was only around my fist. Do me a favor and think about it. I'd hate to have you lift the curse only to get yourself killed. Keep your phone handy. I'll text you the second I get the address for the estate, Gregory said. And Jack... What? Watch yourself. He hung up and I tossed my cell onto the couch. Gregory was right. I was a thief. I had become one for the sake of saving relics and artifacts. I'd followed in the footsteps of my parents. I'd done what was necessary. But I'd never killed anyone. I wasn't a cold-blooded murderer. I wasn't an assassin. For my family, for vengeance and peace of mind, knowing Chance and Gabriel could never hurt anyone else again, maybe I'd have to become one.
Chapter 9. Nyala. I was sitting on the balcony of the apartment. It was Sunday and getting kind of late. I should have been heading back to Academy, but I held out. A tiny part of me was still reminiscing on how Thursday night had gone. Those hours with Jack had been unexpected. Did I believe everything he told me? Yes and no. He'd left so abruptly after he got that phone call. I wondered what was so bad that he wouldn't simply tell me. Tugging the flannel blanket tighter around me, I mused over those few long moments on the couch we'd shared. How long had we simply sat there and kissed? Fire had danced in his eyes and at his hands after we'd finally parted. Uncertainty had looked back at me too, but only for a moment. Then it had been happiness and delight and desire. I'd hoped he would have shown up this weekend, but he never had. He texted me Friday night before I'd fallen asleep. The message had been short and simply said he hoped I had a relaxing weekend and to not worry about him too much, that he'd be all right. I'd messaged him back, but I hadn't heard from him since. My message of asking him how his Saturday was going remained unread. I typed and deleted 4 messages before giving up on sending him anything else. That was when I decided to come out and sit for a while. It wasn't that I believed Jack was a bad guy, not like Roger had turned out to be. But whatever he wasn't telling me, I sensed it was because he was trying to protect me somehow. The sickness was impossible to keep from me anymore, though he hadn't given me any details of what afflicted him. The notion that he was cursed had bothered me all weekend. It had explained the regret I'd seen in his eyes when it came to us. He was getting close to me, and there was a chance, probably a high one, that I'd get hurt in the end. Just not the same way I'd been hurt by Roger. No, this way would definitely be harder to get over. My chest tightened, imagining finding Jack dead on the floor after one of those terrible fits. I shook my head hard to shake away the image. He's not going to die. You won't let him, I argued with myself. Whatever sickness he had, magical or otherwise, I'd find a way to help him. I fiddled with my cell and debated texting Briar. It felt like I'd been bothering her way too much lately. She and Zach didn't have much time left on their trip. I was not going to be the reason they came home early. I managed to talk her out of that once. I doubted I'd get lucky a second time. Knowing it'd be better to return to campus this evening instead of having to get up early, I got up off the bench and headed inside. I laid the blanket on the couch and aimed for the hallway leading to my bedroom. A loud knock at the door stopped me.
Nyala?
Luke called through the door. I hurried to open it. Luke and Nick were on the doorstep. Their grave expressions were enough to tell me this wasn't a social visit for the hell of it. After Jack left Thursday night, I'd sent that text to Luke and Nick, asking them to find out what they could about Jack Scott. I hadn't stopped feeling nauseous about going behind Jack's back. But what other choice did I have? That was fast. And that good, huh? I asked and stepped aside to let them in.
It's interesting,
Luke said, shutting the door behind him.
We looked for you on campus.
I puttered into the kitchen and put the kettle on the stove after filling it up. Something told me I would need a calming brew to get through wherever this conversation was about to lead. I had some things to think over. Nervously, I tugged on the long sleeves of my sweatshirt. Do you two want a cup? They nodded, and I set out 3 black mugs covered in silver stars. I rummaged in the cabinets for the box of loose lavender and chamomile tea. Nick and Luke stayed on the other side of the breakfast counter, ever watchful. You know, you can just get on with it, I said, while I scooped out tea and filled 3 of the wire balls for loose leaf. I'm not going to suddenly flood the apartment.
What things did you have to think about?
Nick asked. I'm not sure I should tell you yet, since I'm assuming you're here to talk about Jack. Nick's silence spoke loud and clear, as did the concerned glance he gave Luke. Look, I said, flattening my hands on the countertop. I know he's hiding something from me, or a few somethings. But I'm trusting my gut, and my gut says the reason he's keeping secrets is to protect me from whatever he believes I need protecting from. I cringed at my own twisting words. You know what I mean. And besides, after what happened Thursday night? I paused and shook my head while my cheeks grew hot. Frost spread out from my palms, decorating the counter. I did not need to give them those details. Never mind.
It's not necessarily bad news,
Luke assured me, a knowing look in his eyes that said he was happy for me. But it's not great either, I argued. Neither said a word after the kettle whistled and I'd poured us 3 mugs of steaming water. I dumped a tea ball in each and handed out the drinks. We took them to the living room. I curled up at one end of the couch under the flannel blanket. Holding the mug between my palms, I impatiently nodded for them to get on with it.
Since he's been on campus, we've found him sneaking around places most students don't bother with.
Luke started.
We caught him near the artifact buildings before you texted us. We let him break in to see what he'd do.
I'm sorry, you did what? I exclaimed.
It was the easiest way to figure out what he's doing, Luke said. He took nothing out of either one. No magic was tampered with or used inside. Whatever he's looking for, he hasn't found it yet.
What would he be after at Academy?
We're not sure, Nick said. We haven't set him down yet to chat. That'll be coming soon enough. First, we wanted to share with you what we did find out. Has he said anything about transferring from another academy?
Well, yeah, the first day. But that's not weird.
It is when he's done it 6 times in the last year and a half.
Luke removed a file folder from his jacket and laid it on the coffee table. He flipped it open, revealing several sheets of paper with Jack's name and face.
He never gave a reason either, simply removed himself from classes and turned up in another academy a few weeks later.
I set my mug aside and scooped out the papers. I'm sure there's a good explanation.
There might be.
Luke hesitated, but Nick gave him a nod and he went on.
However, during those periods when he wasn't attending classes somewhere, he turned up in some not-so-great circles.
And that would be what Jack was trying to protect me from. I sighed, but if Jack wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I'd find out so I could see if there was a way to help him, or at least understand what he was up to. And maybe figure out if he's playing you. I let out a few curses that Briar would be proud of. Nick and Luke smirked at my small outburst. These bad circles, are we talking cultish level here, or what?
Nyala, are you sure you want to know all of this?
Nick asked. I dropped the papers on the table. I appreciate you looking out for me, but I'll be fine. Luke removed a second, much thicker folder from his jacket and handed it to me without batting an eye.
Jack's been spotted hanging around smugglers and thieves. It's all in the file. These people he's spending time with are known for trafficking magical relics, artifacts, cursed items. Basically, anything that's ever been touched by magic, these associates of Jack's have been around them at one point or another.
At the mention of cursed items, my pulse picked up. Was that what had happened? Jack accidentally came into contact with a cursed object and was suffering now because of it? I flipped open the folder and sifted through page after page of information. This was what he'd been hiding from me? Or was he here searching for a specific item to steal? And after he got what he wanted, would he simply up and leave without a word? At least the regret I'd seen on his face made more sense now. It wasn't only that he was dealing with this sickness or curse that afflicted him. He hadn't intended to meet me, let alone get close to me. Now that he had, what would he do? I sifted through the pages again, not believing that the Jack who was so kind to me and had such heart hung around thieves and smugglers and those who ran the black market. There had to be an explanation.
It gets more interesting once you realize who his parents were.
Were? I said to Nick.
It's near the back of the folder. A year and a half ago, Jack's parents, Clark and Jenny Scott, were found murdered in their home.
They were his parents? I asked, surprised. I knew Jack's last name was Scott, but it hadn't even crossed my mind that he was their son. Scott was a somewhat common last name. They're renowned historians, as well as magical archaeologists, or they were, I suppose. The pieces they discovered while alive, and more that they protected, are beyond count. They were also at the forefront of preserving magical historical sites. Nick and Luke blinked at me. What? It's my field of study. Of course I know who they are.
Well, their murder was never solved, and their youngest son, Chance, has been missing ever since.
Nick explained. The file nearly toppled from my fingers, and I hurried to set it on the table. He never mentioned his family, only that he wasn't on speaking terms with them right now. He also said he was an only child.
Technically, he wasn't lying about not speaking to his family,
Luke murmured. And the lie about his brother? Why wouldn't he have mentioned any of this to me? Another horrible thought hit me, and my heart went out to Jack. Was he there that night when it happened?
According to the reports, he was.
Luke went on.
He states he came home to find men inside the mansion. They'd already had his parents magically bound. He rushed to try and free them, but was outnumbered and knocked unconscious. By the time the authorities arrived, the others were long gone. His parents were dead, and Chance was deemed missing. The case is open as far as we can tell, but there hasn't been any progress made.
You don't sound happy about that.
Nick scoffed. If you ask me, They're not even trying to solve it.
Why?
We can't say,
Nick said.
If he's looking for his brother, moving around makes sense, but not why he'd be checking out the academies. We won't know more about his motives until we talk to him. Now, before this incident, Jack's name does come up linked with several high-profile thefts involving generals and prominent government officials. There's been no proof that Jack was responsible for the thefts, but he has ties to those who are. Granted, the targets of these crimes aren't exactly, how should I put it, the cleanest when it comes to their personal dealings.
They're corrupt? I asked.
In simple terms, yes, though evidence has yet to be found or brought against them.
Nick said.
Other than those instances, Jack's clean. No record. Nothing. He's not a bad guy, not like the ones we faced down in the past,
Luke added.
but he's not exactly a good guy either.
Shoving the blanket off my lap, I stood up and walked toward the back door. I'd spent a decent amount of time with Jack since this fall semester started. He'd stepped in for me when he didn't have to, and he was so damned easy to talk to. His laugh and his roguish smile drove me crazy most of the time. When he avoided talking about his family, I let myself believe he just didn't get along with them, or was estranged from them. After befriending Briar, it was easier for me to understand why somebody would be so guarded about themselves and their past. He told me that he wasn't ready to talk about some things yet, I said softly, that he didn't want to burden me with whatever he was going through. I never thought it was because his parents had been murdered and his brother vanished.
He's never given you any cause to worry?
Nick asked, sounding concerned. No, none. That's what I don't understand. I've been around bad guys, and Jack isn't like them at all. Not even close. I started to speak, but stopped and shook my head.
Nyala, what is it?
I met Luke's gaze in the reflection of the back door. Did anything come up in the files about him being sick or cursed?
Nothing we could find. Why?
I spun around to face them, wringing my hands and telling myself that what I was about to divulge was for a good reason. I said, he has these intense coughing fits. They've gotten worse since he's been here, a lot worse, and a few times there's been blood on his hand. He won't tell me what's wrong with him, but he's getting weaker. He keeps telling me there's nothing I can do to help him, which makes me think it's a curse of some kind.
There were no medical files for him that would explain being sick to that extent.
Nick stood up and seemed more curious than like he was about to go investigate some hardened necromancer.
A curse would make sense based on his history. We'll look into it more.
You're not going to talk to him yet, right?
Do you want to be there when we do?
Luke asked. I'm not sure if that'd be better or worse.
It might do him good to see a friendly face.
Luke gripped my shoulder, smiling warmly.
If he's trying to find his brother and hunt down whoever killed his parents, he shouldn't be doing it alone, especially if he's dealing with a curse.
You guys would help him? Just like that? Luke and Nick nodded.
You said trust him, and we trust you.
Nick said.
Until you tell us there's a reason not to, we won't, but we should speak with him soon.
Let me text him and see if I can't get him to come out here one evening this week. I think it'd be better to have the conversation here, I suggested.
That works for us, but we'll be keeping an eye on him all the same,
Luke warned.
We don't want anything to happen to you. Yeah, Briar would roast us alive.
Nick shuddered but gave me a wink. He scooped up the files off the coffee table and tucked them under his arm.
If anything changes before we're able to all sit down and have that chat, if he does start making you second guess, you call us, understand?
Nothing like having two more big brothers hanging around, I teased.
You know you love us.
Luke pulled me into a bear hug and kissed the top of my head. Nick did the same, shaking me a bit until I was cackling at him to put me down. I'll see you guys tomorrow, I told them while I walked them to the door. And thanks for doing this, though I'm still not sure what to think about any of it.
Don't think on it too hard. Right now it looks as if Jack simply needs some help. We can be that help if he'll let us.
Nick saluted me and headed out the door, his brother right behind him. I closed and locked it behind them, figuring I'd head back to campus in the morning. After the information Nick and Luke had just dumped on me, I didn't want to risk running into Jack. Not tonight. Before turning in, I checked my phone one last time. There was no message from Jack. I turned my phone off, set it on the nightstand, and tried not to overreact. Chapter 10. Jack.
I'd been pacing around this damn small apartment since leaving Nyala on Thursday night. Sleeping had been impossible, and there was no point in trying to search for any other areas of the campus. Not when I had all the information I could glean from this place. The artifact wasn't here, and nothing in Academy's records would tell me where it had been moved to. It was nearing midnight. If I was a normal student, I'd be trying to get some semblance of rest before classes Monday morning. Those no longer seemed important. Not when I was so damn close to finding the dagger. Passing by the end table, I peeked at my phone. There was a single message from Nyala, unopened, but nothing from Gregory. I opened Nyala's text. My fingers hovered over the letters for a minute, then I grunted and tossed my phone on the couch. "What are you doing, man? You never should have gotten so close." After Thursday night, I'd almost taken a car out to Silent Heights to tell Nyala all of it, everything that had gone wrong in my life. I wanted to tell her about the events leading up to my parents getting killed, and tell her about what kind of traitorous asshole my brother turned into. I'd almost told her about the curse that had been placed on me, the curse that was going to end my life if I couldn't find the dagger. I'd already promised I'd tell her everything soon enough. Why not do it now and get it over with? The moment Gregory texted me the address of the Morris estate, I'd be leaving Academy. I might not be coming back. The smart move would be to take off now instead of risking running into Nyala again. Not until I knew I was going to be able to remove the curse. Once it was gone and I'd taken care of business with my brother, then I could come back and talk to her, explain everything. Maybe she'd listen and believe me. Or she'll call you a lying piece of shit, or you'll end up dead anyway. Furious, I kicked the table on my next pass and sent it careening into the wall. It left a dent behind, and I glowered at it. A buzzing sound filled the room. It took me a second to realize it was my phone, and I rushed to snatch it off the couch. There was a stream of text from Gregory telling me the address of the estate, along with a message that said I owed him a favor for having to pay a pretty penny for the intel. I didn't much care what Gregory wanted from me. If this lead panned out, I'd do whatever he wanted. I backed out of his text and stared at Nyala's once again. Not sure what made me do it. I sent her a quick reply, saying that if she didn't see me tomorrow, she would soon. There was something I had to take care of, and I'd be back at Academy as soon as it was done. After, I hoped she'd forgive me. Before I could overthink, I hit send and hurried to gather what I might need for breaking into the Morris estate. I doubted it'd be as simple as picking the front door lock. When dawn broke, I was already driving away from Academy in the car I'd checked out. The drive would take a couple of hours. Passing through Silent Heights on my way out, I told myself I'd be back. I might have told myself I could handle walking away from Nyala without a word, but it wasn't possible. Even if I was just coming back to say goodbye, I had to do it. For both our sakes. Getting through the front gate had been more of a challenge than I'd assumed. After half an hour of working around the warding without breaking it, I finally got through it and drove up to the mansion itself. It was hard to tell if anyone was there. From what Gregory had found out, Briar and Zach owned the place now. They were still on their trip, but that didn't mean the place was empty. There were no other vehicles I could see. I climbed out of the car and approached the front door. I rang the bell. No one answered, and I set to work testing the warding around the door and windows. There was always a weak spot. The trick was finding it without setting off the warding. After so many years of working with my parents to save lost artifacts, relics, and weapons, I'd picked up a trick or two. Sometimes to beat the thieves, you had to become a thief. And I was damn good at what I did. Too good. That was what my parents had always said and worried about. One day my skills wouldn't be enough to get my ass out of trouble. I'd get too cocky. But it hadn't been my mistake that had cost them their lives. It had been Chance betraying his family. Why, I still wasn't sure. Once I found the dagger and removed the curse, I'd be tracking him down to beat the answer out of him before I avenged our parents. Near the rear of the mansion, the tiny flames I'd summoned and had sent fluttering around the warding like birds pecking at the windows finally found my way in. The magic around a window on the second story was weaker than anywhere else. If I was lucky, I'd be able to slip through it without causing any sort of alarm to be triggered. Recalling my flames, I searched for my way up the wall. Vines covered most of the house, and they looked sturdy enough. Hand over hand, I hoisted myself up the wall to the window. Summoning my fire once again, I eased the flames into the sigils of the warding that had been placed here to protect the mansion. It took time, and sweat broke out on my forehead, despite the chilly breeze the overcast day had brought. The sigils shifted and changed until they parted enough for me to reach the window and magically unlock it. I slipped inside and landed softly on my feet. I straightened and raised my brow at the space I'd entered. It was utterly empty. There wasn't even a random box in here or a broken piece of furniture. There were a few scorch marks on the walls and floors. Slowly, I eased my way across the floor, testing for any squeaking boards in case someone was around. I pulled the door open and peered into the dark interior of a hallway. I summoned a tiny ball of fire to rest in my hand, turned to the right, and started my search. If the dagger of vitality was here, I'd find it. If not, there was a high chance I'd be leaving this world before I could track it down. With that depressing truth hanging over me, I opened the first door I came to and set to work.
Chapter 11. Nyala. The sounds of cellos playing dragged me from sleep. I jerked upright, realizing it wasn't my alarm going off. I fumbled for my cell phone on the nightstand, and through blurry eyes peered at the screen. Briar was calling me. Sitting upright, I mumbled a hello through a yawn.
"Hey, I didn't mean to wake you up,"
she said in a rush. "No, you're fine. Is something wrong?" I asked, rubbing my eyes to try and wake myself up the rest of the way.
"Maybe. Are you at the estate by any chance?"
"Huh? No. I'm still in Silent Heights. Why? Bri?" She cursed, and Zach muttered something in the background.
"The warding's acting strange. I was hoping it was you going there for a visit. Bev is away this month, but if it's not you, then I think we have a problem."
The mansion, with its magical lock, had been tweaked to allow Zach's brothers, Hunter, and myself access. Briar and Zach had told us all we were family. It only made sense we, too, had a home away from Academy and the Talons HQ, if any of us ever needed it. I'd been out there a couple of times while they'd been on their honeymoon. The grounds were amazing to walk on, but without Briar there to light up the place, the mansion itself felt far too empty and quiet for me to stay long. "Do you want me to go check it out?" I asked. I threw my legs over the side of the bed and pushed myself upright. I could use an excuse not to be at Academy today.
"I heard Luke and Nick stop by last night."
"Yep, and I'm sure you heard all about it from Zach already."
"Whatever's going on with Jack, he has his reasons. Or it's not what we think, or who the hell knows? I mean, really, look at all the shit I went through. If you believe he cares for you as much as he seems to, I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. At least give him the chance to tell you everything himself."
"That's my plan. Convincing him to accept our help is what's going to be a problem. He's about as stubborn as you are." I put her on speakerphone while I grabbed a pair of jeans and a long-sleeve shirt off the bedroom floor. She was telling me she was just going to send Nick and Luke to check out the estate. I turned back, ready to say I still needed a distraction of some kind today, but I noticed the text waiting for me. Jack had finally messaged me back. I read the message twice, then cursed.
"Nyala?"
Briar asked. "Jack texted me," I said, then read the message.
"What's that supposed to mean?" she asked.
I was going to say I wasn't sure, then smacked myself in the forehead. "The Morris estate. You guys have artifacts and shit there, right? From your dad?"
"Yeah, a few things. We haven't exactly gone through all the rooms yet before we left."
"Damn it. I think Jack went there."
"Went where? The estate? Why?"
Zach was talking in the background. Briar relayed what we were talking about, then she simply put the call on speakerphone.
"Nyala, what's going on?"
he asked. "Look, your brothers think Jack is at Academy looking for something. It might be tied to the murders of his parents. They're not sure yet. With his background and who his associates are, and with what he's been doing since he got here, and that text, I think he went to the estate." I trailed off. Another horrible thought struck me. Frost exploded out of my hands and shot up my arms. He used me. He knew I was friends with you two, and he used me. Are you sure? Briar asked. I told him about so much.
Did you talk about the estate? Zach asked. It's not as if you know what's all there.
No, I guess that's true. And I never talked about that place. I mean, he asked about you guys, but nothing prying, I admitted, but couldn't shake the anxiety creeping up my spine or the anger that came with it that I'd been played for a fool. So it's just a coincidence that he befriended me, got close to me?
It does happen. Listen, Nick and Luke are headed to the estate. They'll check it out. It could be nothing,
he told me. Or it's Jack. I want to go with them.
Nyala,
Zach said, but Briar whispered something to him.
Fine. I'll text my brothers to swing by and pick you up on their way out. What are you going to do if it's Jack?
Demand he give me a straight answer. It's the least I deserve. Be careful, Briar said sternly. I will.
Good, and we'll be seeing you soon. We're coming home.
You don't have to, I told her, but she laughed.
Yeah, we do. We'll be there tomorrow morning by the latest. Text me once you get to the estate.
I promised I would, then disconnected the call. I tugged on my knee-high boots, grabbed my brown leather jacket, and stood by the front door to wait for Nick and Luke to arrive. Frost continued to form, melt into water droplets, then reform on my hands. If Jack was poking around the Morris estate, I was going to freeze him in an ice block, everything except his head so he could talk. There was no way his meeting me on his first day here was by chance. No way the world worked like that. He'd met me for a reason. He'd known I was close to Briar and Zach. So much for trusting your gut. The moment I said it, though, it felt wrong. I'd seen evil. I'd looked it dead in the eye enough times to know what it looked like, how it sounded, how it made my skin crawl. Jack hadn't done any of that. He'd made me feel alive and happy. He'd helped me to work through the mess I'd turned into lately. He'd made me feel like I was coming home. It took some effort, but I held on to hope that Briar was right and there was a reasonable explanation for everything. If not, if it turned out he was nothing more than a sneaking, backstabbing asshole, then I'd let the Pierce brothers deal with him. A horn beeped not long after, and I hurried out of the apartment, down the steps, and climbed into the waiting SUV. Nick was driving, but Luke gave me a firm nod after I'd climbed into the back seat. It was going to be a long few hours to get to the estate. Chapter 12. Jack.
My aggravated shout bounced around the empty mansion. Nothing. There was no hint the dagger was here or ever had been here, and I was running out of time. I'd checked the massive house from top to bottom, unless I'd missed a room somewhere. A tickle started at the back of my throat, and my chest ached. I fought against the fit, holding it in while I summoned the firebirds again. Seek, I ordered. The 5 fiery birds fluttered into the air and soared around the main floor of the house. Slowly, I moved after them, keeping note of where they all were in case one found something. They searched the first floor, then darted upstairs. I jogged to keep up with them, the cough working its way up until I was hacking at the top of the steps. I doubled over, clutching at my sternum, while I struggled to get air into my lungs. I yanked my handkerchief out of my pocket and held it to my mouth, while I dragged my ass down the hall. The firebirds had all turned down the same corridor that I had thought ended in a wall. They flitted against the faded green paint. One by one, designs burned to life. Ones that had been etched into the wall itself. A secret door. The sigils had lost their potency over time. Briar and Zach must not have realized this was here, or they simply didn't bother to replenish the power. Either way, it worked out for me. I held up my hand, calling the birds back to my palm. They condensed into one larger bird that resembled a hawk. I set it loose. It circled overhead, let out a loud cry, then flew straight at the burning sigils. My power radiated from the hawk, sinking deeper and deeper into the wall. Streams of fire erupted from it. Once they reached a sigil, they broke it apart, until the last one went out. The hawk faded until it was merely a burned outline on the wall. The edges of a doorway appeared, then swung outward into the hall a couple of inches. Holding my breath, I reached around the edge of the wall, pulled it open further, and stared up at the set of rickety wooden steps leading up and around a corner. I sensed no other magic protecting the space. Summoning a small flame to hover in front of me and light my way, I headed up the stairs, cringing each time they creaked and groaned beneath my weight. Miraculously, I made it to the top without crashing through the staircase. The dusty air aggravated my already sore lungs. A tickle I couldn't shake started at the back of my throat. Damned allergies. It wasn't enough I had to deal with the curse attempting to kill me. Now I had to suffer through years of dust buildup and probably mold floating through the air. I took a small orb of fire and spread my hands wide. The one flame broke into 10 and shot across the ceiling to light the large space. From the circular walls, this was the top floor of one of the towers near the rear of the mansion. There were crates stacked to the ceiling at one end of the curve. Black lace curtains hung from the line of windows that ran almost the entire circumference of the space. They'd become torn over the years, eaten away by time. The floor creaked loudly with each step I took. Several paintings hung on the walls. An ornately silver and gold framed standing mirror sat near the center of the room, and several large black trunks that could have easily held 2 bodies each flanked the door I'd entered the room through. Whispering floated past my ears, but there was no one up here that I could see. I waited, and the noise faded. Probably a hallucination, I told myself. Or it's haunted. Wouldn't that be a great addition to your already shitty day? Though my patience was wearing thin, as was my strength for staying upright from the last fit I endured, I started with a stack of crates to my right and the first large black trunk. I'd go in a clockwise direction around the room, checking every box, crate, trunk, and flimsy floorboard I could find. The curse, however, had other ideas. The crate I'd hefted onto another in order to open it slipped from my numb hands. The strength went out of my arms, and I staggered into another stack, knocking them over with a loud crash. A rush of dizziness hit me next, and a rushing sound filled my ears. I stumbled, fighting to stay upright. The coughing started, and blood filled my mouth. I fumbled for my handkerchief, but couldn't get it free of my pocket. I gagged and, falling to all fours, heaved, spitting more blood onto the floorboards. The whispering started up again, and I could have sworn there was someone standing close by. "Aw, what's the matter, big brother?" Chance's voice crooned near my ear. "Are you sick?" I raised my head, but Chance wasn't there. "You know, this wouldn't be happening if you'd just stayed with me," he said, as a familiar pair of brown boots appeared before me. "A life working for Gabriel is a lot better than dying alone in some stranger's attic." I reached out a trembling hand toward him, but grabbed only air. "Chance!" His cackle deafened me until it was drowned out by the coughing fit that rattled me to the bone. I crawled forward, not sure what I was doing. I was too late. I was gonna die up here, alone, just as he said. It was like 1,000 daggers were stabbing me in the chest. I gasped for air and made it a few more inches. My bloodied hand flattened against a flat surface. Squinting, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, smeared with the blood that covered my hand. That damned whispering started up again. And the frame, was it glowing? "Jack!" "Nyala?" I gasped, turning around. Was she here? "Jack, answer me, you idiot!" I tried to do just that, but the whispering behind me became muttering. The words were familiar, as was the language. I whipped around again, studying the frame around the mirror, but I couldn't see clearly. Footsteps pounded up the stairs and down the hall, coming toward me. "Jack!" 2 other voices joined Nyala's. I didn't know them and was too distracted by the mirror to worry about who she was with. The frame around the mirror pulsed, sending a ripple of power through the room. The glass shimmered like water. Opening my eyes wide, I was finally able to make out the markings around the mirror. Shit! I fell backward, scrambling to get away from it, but the curse wasn't easing up on me. I coughed, unable to get enough air in my lungs to yell for Nyala and whoever was with her to stay away. I crawled toward the door, even as the first tugging of magic pulled on my ankles. Jack! Shit! Nyala exclaimed, appearing in the doorway. He's up here! We need help! I shook my head, waving at her to go away. She ignored me and knelt at my side. Her hands came around my arms to haul me upright. No! I gasped between coughing. Leave! We have to leave! What? Mirror! I uttered. The mirror! Go! She glanced past me, then had her arm around my shoulders, and I was on my feet. A rush of water helped push me all the way up, and she half dragged me toward the door. Another ripple of power exploded out of the mirror, striking us in the back and knocking us to the floor. Nyala! A man shouted. Nick! She started to yell something else, but that shout turned into a panicked scream. What the hell was that? I had no chance to answer. A whip of shadow lashed around my ankle and yanked me toward the mirror. Nyala grabbed my hand to pull me back, but more shadows burst from the mirror and wound about her, too. She screamed again, using her magic to try and free us. I attempted to summon my fire, but was too weak to make more than a spark. Nyala! The two talents I'd had a run-in with stood in the doorway to the room. They rushed forward, hands outstretched for us. The power of the mirror gave one more hard yank, and Nyala and I were dragged through the mirror. I rolled across the hard, rocky ground, cursing after I finally came to a stop against a large boulder. Nyala yelped beside me. I pushed up to all fours, observing our surroundings. I'd heard of this place from stories, but had thought the gateway to it had been destroyed a long time ago. Why did Derek Morris have it tucked away in his freaking attic? Nyala muttered, pulling my eyes to her. Shit, this was bad. If it was just me, this place might offer me a better death than choking on my own blood. But Nyala, I couldn't let her die here. I wouldn't. Moving took all the strength I had, but I reached Nyala's side and pulled her upright. Why? I yelled. Why didn't you leave? I coughed, nearly passing out. Nyala! Why do you think? She yelled back. Why were you even at the Morris estate? Before I could answer, a howl that sent shivers down my spine echoed through the dead trees surrounding us. The sky was an eerie grayish red. The air was dry, and the hot wind that gusted through the dead limbs sent them to creak and groan as if they too were alive. Jack, where are we? Nyala whispered, clinging to my hand. Hell, I replied, or a place close enough to it. Another howl came closer this time, and it was quickly joined by two more beasts. We need to move right now. Nyala didn't hesitate or argue. She helped me to my feet, and we set off sprinting away from the beasts coming to kill us.
End of Book 6. This has been Secrecy, Next Generation, Academy of Ancients, Book 6. Written by Avery Cross. Narrated by Jack Ainsworth. Copyright 2022 by Avery Cross. Production copyright by Avery Cross.